Welcome back to Void of Fears. Before we jump into today's story, I've got to ask for a quick favour. If you could smash that like button, drop a comment below, and hit subscribe if you haven't already. It seriously makes a huge difference. YouTube's algorithm loves that stuff, and it pushes my videos to new viewers who might dig these stories too. I really appreciate every single one of you who takes the time to do that. It means the world to me and helps keep this channel growing. Alright, enough of me rambling. Let's dive into today's story. The observation room at the Distant Reach facility existed in a state of perpetual twilight, illuminated only by the pale glow of monitors displaying sectors of space so distant that the light reaching Earth had begun its journey before humanity discovered fire. Dr. Meridian Thorne sat in his customary position, spine curved from 17 years of watching emptiness, eyes tracking across data streams that had long ago blurred into meaningless patterns. The facility itself crouched in the New Mexico desert like something ancient and watchful, its 12 satellite dishes pointed at infinity, recording the silence of a universe that had never once answered back. Outside, the desert stretched in all directions, a landscape of sand and stone and scraggly vegetation that had learned to survive on almost nothing. Inside, the air conditioning hummed its constant rhythm, fighting against the heat that turned the building's metal exterior into an oven during the day. The smell of old electronics and stale air had become so familiar that Meridian no longer noticed it, just as he no longer noticed the ache in his lower back, or the way his eyes burned from staring at screens for hours without blinking. It was 11:34 p.m. on March 3rd, 2025, and Meridian was doing what he'd done every night for nearly 2 decades, cataloguing the deaths of distant stars, measuring the positions of planets that would never harbour life, documenting the slow and inexorable heat death of a cosmos that cared nothing for the brief flicker of consciousness that had emerged on one unremarkable world, orbiting one unremarkable star. Kepler 442b appeared on his primary monitor as it had thousands of times before, a grey sphere hanging in the void 1,200 light-years from Earth. He'd surveyed this planet 6 years ago during a routine exoplanet mapping project. Dead world. No atmosphere, no magnetic field, geologically inert. Another tombstone in a universe full of them. He'd noted its existence in the database and moved on, never expecting to think about it again. But tonight, something was different. A light had appeared on the planet's surface, bright enough to register on instruments, designed to detect the faint glow of distant galaxies. Meridian stared at the anomaly, his tired brain struggling to process what he was seeing. The angle was wrong. Starlight didn't reflect that way. The planet's rotation didn't match the apparent position of the source, and the light itself was too steady, too focused, too deliberate in its intensity. His hand moved towards the radio before his conscious mind had fully processed the implications. The motion felt distant, as if someone else was controlling his body. His fingers found the transmit button and pressed it with a force that made the plastic casing creak. "Iris? Tobias? I need you in observation immediately. Don't ask questions, just come." The urgency in his own voice surprised him. Meridian couldn't remember the last time he'd felt anything resembling excitement or fear. 17 years of watching nothing had dulled his capacity for emotional response. But now, staring at that impossible light, he felt something stirring in his chest. Something that might have been wonder, or might have been dread. Dr. Iris Covenant arrived first, her appearance confirming the late hour. She wore flannel pajama pants under a hastily donned laboratory coat, her dark hair tangled from sleep, one side of her face still bearing the creased imprint of a pillowcase. She'd been dreaming about her daughter's 7th birthday party, about cake and presents and the ordinary joy of watching a child discover the world. The dream had been sweet and normal and safe, and the sharp edge of panic in Meridian's voice had ripped her away from it into a reality that suddenly felt less certain. "Meridian, this better be genuinely extraordinary," she said, attempting to inject some levity into her tone, but the attempt died when she saw his face. In all their years working together, through equipment failures and funding crises and the slow, grinding disappointment of finding nothing but emptiness in the cosmos, she had never seen Meridian look frightened. Concerned, yes. Frustrated, certainly, but never frightened. Until now. Tobias Lark followed 3 minutes later, clutching his laptop against his chest with both arms, as if it were a shield. His wire-rimmed glasses sat crooked on his face, hastily put on in the dark. He'd forgotten to put on shoes and wore mismatched socks, one black and one navy blue. His mind was still half caught in the dream he'd been having, something about falling through endless darkness while voices whispered in languages he almost understood. "Someone better be dying or discovering aliens," he muttered, then stopped mid-step when he saw Meridian and Iris both staring at the main monitor. The quality of their silence made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Meridian pointed at the screen without looking away from it. His hand was shaking slightly, a tremor he couldn't control. "Tell me what you see. Tell me I'm not hallucinating. Tell me this is real." They crowded around the monitor, their faces bathed in its pale glow. The image was grainy, degraded by distance and atmospheric interference, pulled across impossible gulfs of space by instruments that pushed the boundaries of human engineering. But there was no mistaking what the image showed. Something stood on the surface of Kepler 442b. Something tall and angular and utterly, completely, impossibly wrong. The structure rose from the dead planet's surface like a monument to concepts humanity had never conceived. Its proportions were too perfect, its angles too precise, its very existence too deliberate to be anything natural. It stood alone against the barren landscape, solitary and purposeful, casting a shadow that stretched for kilometers across cratered stone. Tobias leaned closer, his breath fogging the monitor's surface. His fingers found his glasses and removed them, cleaned them on his shirt, replaced them, as if the problem might be with his vision, rather than with reality itself. That's artificial. That has to be artificial. There's no geological process that produces geometry like that. 612 meters tall, Meridian said, his voice flat and distant. I've measured it 8 times, cross-referenced with 3 different instruments. The error margin is less than 2 meters. It's just standing there. No surrounding structures, no infrastructure, no context. Just that thing, alone on a dead world. Iris felt something cold crystallize in her stomach, a sensation like drinking ice water too fast. How long has it been there? When did it appear? Meridian's fingers moved across his keyboard with practiced precision, calling up archived observations. 6 years of data scrolled past, survey after survey showing Kepler 442b's surface, exactly as expected. Barren, cratered, empty. Last month's scan showed nothing, absolutely nothing. But that can't be right. You can't construct something that size without us detecting the activity. You can't build a structure 600 meters tall overnight. It's physically impossible. Unless, Tobias said slowly, his analytical mind already racing through possibilities and discarding most of them as insufficient. It was always there. And something changed that allows us to see it now. Something about the way light reflects off it. Or something about our instruments. Or something about us. The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but understood. If the structure had always been there, invisible to their observations until now, what had changed? What mechanism could hide something that size? And more terrifyingly, why would it choose to reveal itself now? They spent the next 76 hours redirecting every available telescope toward that distant world. Meridian called in favors from colleagues across the globe, cashing in 17 years of professional relationships to gain access to instruments more powerful than anything the Distant Reach facility possessed. The Artemis Deep Field Array, normally booked solid months in advance, cleared a 12-hour observation window. The Mauna Kea Observatory in Hawaii contributed 8 hours of time on their adaptive optics system. The European Southern Observatory's Very Large Telescope provided high-resolution spectroscopy. The data that came back should have been exciting, the culmination of decades spent searching for evidence of intelligent life beyond Earth. Instead, it was terrifying. The structure they designated Edifice Prime resolved into horrifying clarity under the scrutiny of humanity's most powerful instruments. It was a monolith, smooth and dark as polished obsidian, rising from the dead planet's surface with proportions that hurt to look at because they were too perfect, too precise, too deliberately constructed to be anything natural. Its surface appeared utterly flawless, unmarked by time or impact or erosion. Iris ran the spectroscopic analysis 4 times, convinced the instruments were malfunctioning. Each time the results came back identical and impossible. The material composition doesn't match anything in our database. Not any element, not any alloy, not any molecular structure we've ever encountered. The spectral lines don't correspond to anything on the periodic table. It's reading as if the thing is made from compressed space-time itself, matter squeezed into configurations that shouldn't exist according to quantum mechanics. She pulled up comparison charts showing the edifice's spectral signature against every known material. Nothing matched, not even close. If I didn't know better, I'd say someone took the fabric of reality and folded it into the shape of a building. But that's nonsense, that's science fiction. Meridian barely heard her. He was deep in geological surveys of Kepler 442b, cross-referencing current observations with historical models, trying to understand the timeline. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, his hands shaking from too much caffeine and not enough food. This planet died 420 million years ago. We can date it precisely from the decay of its magnetosphere and the isotopic composition of its surface. Complete biosphere collapse. Whatever life existed here, if any did, went extinct before the first plants colonized land on Earth. Volcanic activity ceased. The oceans boiled away over millions of years. Tectonic plates froze in place. Nothing has moved on this planet in hundreds of millions of years. He pulled up high-resolution surface maps, showing impact craters that dated back eons. Look at this, meteor impacts from 200 million years ago. We can see them, we can measure them, we can count the secondary craters from debris. But this structure, this edifice, shows zero weathering. No impacts, no erosion from solar wind. No thermal stress fractures from the planet's day-night cycle. It looks exactly like it did the day it was built, however impossibly long ago that was. Tobias was running his own analysis, comparing the structure's dimensions against everything in his architectural database. It's not just unmarked, it's pristine, perfect, as if time doesn't affect it, as if it exists outside normal physical decay. Or, Iris said slowly, pulling up her thermodynamic models, it's made of something designed to last forever, something engineered to survive until the stars go cold, something meant to be here long after whoever built it died. The implications of that statement settled over the room like a shroud. They were looking at something built to outlast civilizations, to outlast species, to outlast geological epochs. Something meant to endure. But endure for what purpose? Meridian spent the following days measuring the edifice obsessively, recording every dimension, every angle, every shadow it cast across the barren landscape. He filled 3 notebooks with calculations, searching for meaning in the numbers, convinced that the structure's proportions held some message. His colleagues at the facility began to worry about him. He stopped going home, stopped showering regularly, survived on vending machine food and coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. And then he found it. A ratio embedded in the edifice's proportions. The relationship between its height and its width. The relationship between its base and its peak. The relationship between its shadow at local noon and its actual dimensions. The same number appeared over and over, a constant that seemed to define the structure's entire geometry. He'd seen that ratio before. He was certain of it. His hands shook as he pulled up architectural databases, searching through humanity's historical monuments. And there it was. The Great Pyramid of Giza. The same ratio between its height and the perimeter of its base. Stonehenge, the same ratio in the spacing of its standing stones. The Moai of Easter Island, the same proportions in their height to width measurements. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the same relationship in its circular arrangements. The Temple of the Sun in Peru, identical proportions in its architectural layout. Ancient structures scattered across Earth, built by civilizations separated by vast oceans and thousands of years, each incorporating the same precise mathematical relationship, a relationship that appeared nowhere in nature, but appeared here, in this alien structure standing on a dead world 1,200 light-years from Earth. They found it, Iris breathed, staring at the comparisons spreading across multiple monitors. Ancient humans somehow detected this thing. Somehow they saw it, or heard about it, or dreamed about it. And they tried to encode it in their monuments. They were trying to pass down a message, trying to warn future generations. Or, Meridian said, his voice hollow, something from here reached them, something that whispered in their dreams, something that taught them to build in ratios that matched what it wanted them to remember. Maybe the monuments weren't warnings from our ancestors. Maybe they were invitations. Maybe they were coordinates. Maybe curiosity is something that gets planted in a species, cultivated across generations, waiting to bear fruit when that species develops the technology to look far enough into space. Tobias turned to stare at him. You're suggesting what, exactly? That this thing has been calling to us across thousands of years? That human civilization was guided toward astronomy specifically so we'd eventually find this? I'm not suggesting anything, Meridian replied. I'm just noting that every ancient culture that built monuments, incorporating this ratio, also left behind stories about visitors from the stars, about beings that came from above and taught them secrets, about knowledge that came with a price. The room fell silent. Outside, dawn was breaking over the New Mexico desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked disturbingly like fire. Iris pulled up the latest observation, the one that had just come in from Mauna Kea. She stared at it for a long moment before speaking. Meridian, look at this. The structure's orientation has changed. They crowded around her monitor. The edifice stood in the same position, on Kepler 442b's surface, but its facing had shifted, degree by microscopic degree, over the course of their observations. It had been turning. Rotating on some axis their instruments couldn't detect, pivoting with glacial slowness towards a new heading. Meridian calculated the new orientation, checked his math twice, felt his heart stutter in his chest. The structure was pointing at Earth, directly at Earth, as if whatever intelligence had built it knew humanity was watching, as if it had been waiting for humanity to develop eyes powerful enough to see across the cosmic gulf, as if the moment humans looked at it, it looked back. 9 days later, at 2:47 a.m. on March 12, 2025, the universe answered back. Tobias was monitoring the overnight radio telescope feed from his apartment, unable to sleep, unable to stop thinking about that structure waiting in the dark. Like a monument to questions humanity shouldn't ask. His apartment was a cluttered space of books and computer equipment. dirty dishes in the sink, laundry piled on a chair he never sat in. The monitors cast the only light, bathing everything in cold blue-white illumination. He'd been reviewing the day's observations for the third time, looking for details he might have missed when the speakers crackled to life. The sound was unlike anything he'd ever heard. Not the hiss of cosmic background radiation, not the random pops and clicks of distant quasars. This was structured, organized, purposeful. A signal repeating with mechanical precision every 47 minutes, broadcast at a frequency that cut through the cosmic noise like a knife. His hands shook as he reached for his phone. The apartment suddenly felt too small. The walls pressing in, the darkness beyond his windows full of watching things. He dialed Meridian's number and listened to it ring. Once, twice before a tired voice answered. "Tobias, it's 3 a.m. "It's broadcasting." The words came out strangled, compressed by the tightness in his chest. "The structure on Kepler 442b. It's sending us a message." There was a long pause, then, "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Meridian arrived at the Distant Reach facility in 12 minutes, still wearing pajama bottoms under his jeans, his hair uncombed, his face unshaven. He'd driven faster than he should have, the desert highway empty at this hour, stars overhead seeming brighter and more numerous than usual, as if the universe itself was leaning in to watch what happened next. Iris pulled into the parking lot 3 minutes after him, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The control room hummed with equipment as Tobias played back the recording. The signal pulsed across monitors in rhythmic waves, beautiful and terrible in its complexity. It started simple, almost elegant. Prime numbers in ascending sequence. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The building blocks of mathematics, concepts that any technological civilization would understand. Then it evolved, building structures from those foundations. Geometric relationships, angular measurements, chemical notation showing atomic structures, physical constants, the speed of light, Planck's constant, the gravitational constant. It was a primer, a key, a foundation for communication built on universal mathematical truths that transcended language and culture and biology. "It's teaching us how to read it," Iris said, her voice filled with wonder and growing horror. "Whoever made this knew we'd eventually look, knew we'd eventually listen, and they prepared a message we could understand." Tobias worked through the night and into the next day, barely pausing to eat or drink or rest. The signal was layered, complex, containing far more information than their initial analysis suggested. He built decryption algorithms, cross-referenced symbol patterns, mapped the mathematical relationships embedded in the transmission. Iris helped, bringing her background in theoretical physics to bear on sections that seemed to reference space-time geometry. Meridian coordinated with other observatories, confirming that the signal was real, not some artifact of their instruments, not some desperate hallucination brought on by too many years of finding nothing. By March 14th, 72 hours after first detection, they had translated the first complete message. Tobias typed the final characters into his workstation, his fingers trembling so badly he had to retype several words. The translation rendered on screen in clean, unambiguous, terrible simplicity. "Quarantine boundary. Violation is extinction. Turn away." The words hung there, glowing against the dark background, impossible to misinterpret. Not a greeting, not an invitation, a warning, a threat, a desperate plea from something or someone that had gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure this message would be understood. The room fell silent. The normal sounds of the facility, the hum of electronics, and the whisper of air conditioning, and the distant rumble of a truck on the highway outside, all seemed to fade away. Iris's notebook slipped from her fingers, pages scattering across the floor like falling leaves. Tobias removed his glasses and cleaned them with the edge of his shirt. A nervous habit, something to do with his hands because his mind couldn't process what to do with this information. Meridian stared at the screen, his face expressionless, his mind cataloguing implications like dominoes falling toward an inevitable and catastrophic conclusion. How long? His voice sounded distant, detached, as if someone else was speaking with his mouth. How long has this been broadcasting? Tobias pulled up his signal analysis, the calculations he'd been running in background processes while focusing on the translation. He checked the signal degradation rates, compared them against known decay models for electromagnetic transmissions propagating through interstellar space. The numbers were consistent across multiple analytical methods. He ran the calculations again, hoping for different results, knowing he wouldn't get them. Based on the pattern erosion and frequency drift, accounting for interstellar medium interference and relativistic effects. He paused, swallowed hard, continued. Thousands of years, possibly tens of thousands. This warning has been playing continuously since before the pyramids were built, since before humans invented agriculture, since before we came down from the trees. This message has been screaming across space since the dawn of human civilization, and we're only now developing instruments sensitive enough to hear it. Within hours, every major observatory on Earth confirmed the transmission. The Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico picked it up. The Square Kilometre Array in South Africa detected it. The FAST telescope in China recorded it. Radio telescopes across the globe, representing dozens of nations and hundreds of scientists, all heard the same signal, all translated the same message. There was no denying it, no dismissing it as error or hoax or misinterpretation. News networks exploded with speculation. Religious leaders debated theological implications. Politicians called emergency sessions. Scientists argued over methodology and meaning. Social media lit up with theories ranging from plausible to insane, and through it all, the signal kept broadcasting, repeating its warning every 47 minutes like a cosmic metronome, counting down to something humanity couldn't yet comprehend. The messages didn't stop with the initial warning. Over the following days and weeks, more content was decoded, each transmission building on the last, each revelation more disturbing than what came before. The structure identified itself through pure mathematical expression, through concepts that transcended words and could be understood by any intelligence, capable of receiving the signal, the witness, the last guardian, final sentinel of the eternal seal. Tobias spent 3 weeks decoding the extended transmissions, working 18-hour days, sleeping in the facility's break room when exhaustion finally overcame him. His apartment sat empty, mail piling up, plants dying from lack of water, the life he'd had before fading like a half-remembered dream. The messages told a story, fragmented and ancient, scattered across mathematical concepts that had to be carefully reconstructed into something resembling narrative. The civilization that built the Sentinel called themselves the Antecedent Choir, a name that translated roughly from mathematical concepts suggesting harmony, unity, those who came first. They had emerged on a world orbiting a star, whose designation in Earth catalogues was nothing more than a string of numbers and letters, a star that had long since burned out and collapsed into a white dwarf. They had achieved consciousness, developed language, discovered fire, built cities, reached for the stars. They had been first, the first intelligent species to arise in their galaxy as far as their extensive explorations could determine. They had been alone in the universe for millions of years, unique, special, the only voices calling out into silence. They had explored thousands of star systems, catalogued tens of thousands of planets, established colonies on hundreds of worlds. Their civilization had spanned light years, thrived for epochs, built wonders that made Earth's greatest achievements look like children's toys. And on an unremarkable planet in an unremarkable system, during a routine survey mission, they had detected an anomaly. The decoded fragments describing their discovery were clinical, stripped of emotion by the mathematical language required to transmit across interstellar distances. But the horror came through anyway, encoded in the structure of the message itself, in the urgency of the warnings, in the desperate measures described. Survey vessel designated Chorus of 7, detected energy readings inconsistent with known physics. Spectroscopic analysis showed space-time distortion, gravitational anomalies, structures in quantum foam. Investigation team deployed, subsurface cavities discovered, artificial construction confirmed, age indeterminate, origin unknown, function unknown, recommendation proceed with caution, recommendation ignored, science team entered, contact lost, recovery team sent, contact lost, military response authorized, entire battalion entered, none returned, homeworld informed, full research expedition organized, 3,000 individuals, best scientists, best equipment, best intentions. The message continued, describing what happened next in the cold language of mathematics that somehow made it worse, more real, more viscerally terrifying than any emotional description could be. Research expedition made contact with anomaly, designated it the Well. Initial observations suggested dormant state. Preliminary tests showed unusual but stable readings. Teams descended to investigate, reached central chamber, found structures that predated current universe, technology that operated on principles outside standard physics, something vast, something old, something that should not exist but did. Investigation proceeded. For 6 planetary rotations, data was transmitted. Exciting findings, revolutionary implications, questions that would redefine civilization's understanding of reality. And then, silence. Homeworld lost contact, recovery mission sent, found research station intact but empty. No life signs, no bodies, no evidence of struggle. Just absence, silence, and something else, something wrong with space itself, something spreading. The decoded sections describing what followed made Iris weep as she read them, tears streaming down her face while her scientific mind tried desperately to comprehend the implications. Homeworld reported anomalies, reality distortions, citizens reporting memories of events that never occurred, historical records changing, children asking about siblings who never existed, stars in the night sky rearranging themselves, physics becoming unreliable, causality becoming optional. It didn't destroy, it unmade, it didn't kill, it edited. Stars remembered different pasts, worlds forgot their present. Biology ran backward. Matter forgot how to be matter. It fed on existence itself, on the concept of reality, and everything it touched ceased to have ever been real in the first place. The Antecedent Choir had tried to fight, tried to flee, tried to understand what was happening as their civilization unraveled from the edges inward, like a sweater catching on a nail. Colonies on the periphery reported strange phenomena, then went silent. Worlds closer to home began experiencing reality distortions. People vanished from photographs, from memories, from history. Buildings that had stood for millennia suddenly had no records of ever being constructed. Stars that had been mapped for generations turned out to never have existed, despite the light from them still traveling through space like ghosts of things that had been erased. Within 6 of their planetary rotations, equivalent to roughly 18 Earth months, the homeworld went silent. Within 20 rotations, every star in their cluster showed no signs of technological civilization. No radio emissions, no artificial light, no evidence that the Antecedent Choir had ever existed, except for the survivors. Fewer than 1 million individuals scattered across the most distant colonies, separated from the expanding zone of unreality by chance and distance. They watched their civilization die from afar, helpless to intervene, capable only of witnessing the end of everything they'd ever known or been. And then they made a choice that Meridian found himself thinking about obsessively, unable to sleep, unable to stop imagining what it must have taken to make that decision. They gathered every resource they had left, every ship capable of interstellar travel, every weapon that might possibly affect something that existed outside normal physics, every piece of technology their dying civilization could salvage from the ruins. And they went back to Kepler 442b, back to the well, back to the thing that had destroyed them. They couldn't kill it. You can't kill something that exists outside causality, something that feeds on the concept of existence itself. They couldn't destroy it. You can't destroy something that had predated the current universal configuration. But they could seal it, trap it, use themselves as the lock. The decoded message described their final act in mathematical terms that somehow made it more heartbreaking than any emotional plea could be. Consensus achieved, survival impossible, extinction inevitable. But others will come, other species will evolve, other civilizations will reach for the stars. We can give them a chance. We can seal the well. We can build a prison that will last until the universe ends. Cost everything we have left, everything we are, everything we could ever be. 80 billion individuals volunteered. 80 billion members of the Antecedent Choir piloted their vessels into the subsurface cavities, initiated compression field, collapsed their matter into the walls themselves, became the seal. Their bodies, their ships, their technology, their consciousness, all compressed into a barrier designed to last forever, to last beyond stars, to last beyond time itself. Process took 47 days. 47 days of individuals flying one by one into the cavities, adding themselves to the seal, knowing they would never leave, never be remembered, never exist as anything except a wall between reality and the thing that wanted to unmake it all. Final count: 80,300,271,416 individuals. Every volunteer counted, every sacrifice recorded, every name preserved in this transmission so that someone, somewhere, someday would know they existed, would know what they did, would know why. Tobias read those names for weeks afterward, scrolling through the decoded list of every single individual who had thrown themselves into the seal. Each name was unique, represented in mathematical notation that suggested identity, personality, individuality. 80 billion people, each one a life with hopes and dreams and families and futures, each one choosing extinction to give other species a chance. The message continued, describing how the remaining survivors, numbering fewer than 1 million after the sealing was complete, built the Sentinel using the last of their functioning technology. They programmed it with quantum processors that would operate for hundreds of millions of years, powered it with zero-point energy extraction that would function until the stars went cold, gave it one purpose, one mission, one eternal directive: warn those who come after, broadcast at maximum power across all frequencies, tell them what happened, tell them what waits, tell them what it costs to seal it away, tell them to stay away. Tell them violation means extinction. Tell them some knowledge isn't worth having. Tell them some doors should never be opened. Tell them we died so they could live. Tell them to honor our sacrifice by surviving. Tell them to run. The final section of the decoded message, the part that Meridian read over and over until he could recite it from memory, until it haunted his dreams and waking hours equally. We are the Antecedent Choir. We were first. We were alone. We found something we should never have found. We woke something that should have stayed sleeping. We paid the price. We sealed it away. But seals can fail. Technology can degrade. Even infinity has an end. Those who come after, this is not discovery. This is not opportunity. This is a graveyard. This is a prison. This is a warning. Honor the dead. Learn from our mistakes. Stay away. Stay away. For your own sake and the sake of all life in the universe, do not look into the well. The United Nations Space Council convened an emergency summit on April 2nd, 2025, less than a month after the initial discovery. Meridian watched the proceedings on a television in the facility's small break room, sitting on a threadbare couch that had been there since before he started working at Distant Reach. He drank water that tasted like plastic from the cooler that never quite kept things cold enough. Outside the window, the New Mexico desert stretched empty and indifferent, the same landscape that had existed before humans arrived and would exist long after humans were gone. The debate followed predictable lines, divided along ideological boundaries that had nothing to do with the actual danger and everything to do with human psychology, with the inability of most people to truly comprehend existential threats, with the arrogance of a species that had never encountered anything it couldn't eventually understand or defeat. The conservative faction, smaller in number but passionate in conviction, argued for establishing a permanent exclusion zone around Kepler 442b. No ships, no probes, no observations beyond passive monitoring. Respect the warning. Honor the sacrifice of a civilization that had died specifically to protect others. Don't repeat their mistakes. But the progressive faction was louder, more numerous, more persuasive, in the way that optimists are always more persuasive than pessimists because humans want to believe in good outcomes. This was potentially the greatest discovery in human history, they argued. Proof of alien intelligence. Evidence of technology beyond human understanding. Answers to questions humanity had been asking since first achieving consciousness. How could they not investigate? How could they justify leaving this mystery unsolved? What kind of species would humanity be if it turned away from knowledge out of fear? Iris presented her evidence via video link, her face pale on the screen, dark circles under her eyes from weeks of insufficient sleep. She'd prepared a comprehensive analysis, correlating stellar cartography with extinct civilization markers, showing a pattern that should have been impossible to dismiss. I've identified 4 other star systems within 200 light-years of Kepler 442b, she explained, displaying star maps annotated with spectroscopic data. Each shows clear signatures of advanced technological civilization in their past, atmospheric composition consistent with industrial activity, artificial isotope ratios suggesting nuclear technology, orbital debris from space-based infrastructure. These were thriving spacefaring civilizations. She paused, letting the past tense sink in. Each one went extinct. Completely. Totally. No survivors. No remnants. No evidence they still exist in any form. And the timeline is consistent. Each civilization showed a period of rapid technological advancement, followed by evidence of deep space observation capability, followed within decades by complete silence. She pulled up timeline comparisons, showing the progression of each extinct civilization alongside humanity's current trajectory. The parallels were disturbing. They disappeared at different epochs over the past 600 million years. Different eras, different stages of galactic evolution. But the pattern is identical. They achieved the technological capability to detect distant planetary systems, they would have been able to observe Kepler 442b. They would have received the Sentinel's warning, and they went extinct shortly afterward. The statistical probability of this being coincidental is effectively zero. Tobias added his analysis, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands that made him grip the edges of the podium to keep them still. The Sentinel's broadcast reaches approximately 3,000 light-years in all directions. That's not arbitrary. That's deliberate. I've mapped every star system within that sphere. 47 show evidence of extinct, advanced civilizations. 47 civilizations that reached a certain technological threshold and then vanished. He displayed the map, a three-dimensional representation of local space with Kepler 442b at the center and markers indicating dead civilizations scattered throughout the sphere, like monuments in a graveyard. The only common factor linking all 47 extinct civilizations is proximity to Kepler 442b. They were all within detection range of the Sentinel's broadcast. They all would have heard the warning, and they're all gone, every single one. The correlation is absolute. The progressive faction had counter-arguments, of course. Maybe those civilizations were destroyed by something else. Maybe they transcended physical form. Maybe they're still out there, just not communicating in ways we can detect. Maybe the danger is exaggerated. Maybe the Antecedent Choir were paranoid. Maybe we're smarter. Maybe we're more capable. Maybe we can handle whatever's down there. Maybe. Meridian made his final appeal on April 15th, standing before the council's cameras in a conference room at the Distant Reach facility. He hadn't slept in 3 days. Hadn't eaten anything substantial in longer than that. His appearance shocked people who knew him. Gaunt, grey-faced, eyes sunken and haunted. He looked like someone who had seen the future and found it empty. The Antecedent Choir was spacefaring for millions of years before our ancestors learned to use fire, he began, his voice hoarse but steady. They had technology we can't even conceptualize. They explored thousands of worlds. They solved problems we're still struggling with. They were successful, advanced, intelligent, careful. And whatever is on Kepler 442b killed all of them. Killed them so thoroughly that they chose to sacrifice their entire species, 80 billion individuals, just to lock it away. He paused, letting the number sink in. 80 billion, more than 10 times Earth's current population. All of them voluntarily flying into oblivion to become a prison wall. We're not smarter than they were. We're not more capable. We're not special. We're just more arrogant. We think because we've never encountered something we couldn't eventually understand, that means nothing truly incomprehensible exists. But the universe is under no obligation to be comprehensible to human minds. The universe doesn't care about our need to know. The universe doesn't reward curiosity. Sometimes the universe punishes it. His hands grip the podium, knuckles white. The Antecedent Choir is trying to save us. They spent their civilization's dying breath building a warning system that would last hundreds of millions of years. They wanted to make sure that every species that ever evolved within detection range would know what happened to them, would know what's waiting on that planet, would know that some knowledge isn't worth having, some questions shouldn't be answered, some doors should stay closed. He looked directly into the camera, addressing not the council but humanity itself. All the billions of people watching this debate play out across their screens. They're offering us something precious. They're offering us survival. All we have to do is listen. All we have to do is honor their sacrifice by not repeating their mistake. Please, I'm begging you. Don't waste what they died to give us. Don't throw away their sacrifice because we can't stand not knowing. Turn away. Establish the exclusion zone. Let the dead rest. Let the well stay sealed. Choose life. The vote took place on April 20th, 2025. Meridian didn't watch it live. He couldn't bear to. He waited in the observation room at distant reach, staring at monitors displaying Kepler 442b, that distant world where 80 billion individuals had compressed themselves into stone to save people they would never meet, species they would never know existed. Iris called him with the results. Her voice was hollow, empty of everything except resignation. 127 to 68 in favor of investigation. They're authorizing an unmanned probe mission, launch scheduled for June. Meridian didn't respond for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. We just killed ourselves. We just voted for extinction because we couldn't stand the idea of not knowing something. He hung up without saying goodbye. The probe designated Sojourner launched from Cape Canaveral on June 23, 2025, atop a heavy-lift rocket that tore through Earth's atmosphere, trailing fire like a comet in reverse. The launch was broadcast globally, watched by billions of people who saw it as humanity's greatest achievement, the next step in our endless reaching towards the stars, proof that humans would never stop exploring, never stop questioning, never stop seeking answers. Meridian watched the launch from the distant reach facility, alone in the observation room, and felt something inside of him break. Not dramatically, not with anger or tears. Just a quiet fracture, a fundamental piece of his worldview cracking and falling away, leaving behind the cold certainty that humanity had just made a choice it would never get to regret. Because there would be no one left to feel regret. Sojourner was built with the most advanced technology humanity had ever created, state-of-the-art sensors capable of detecting individual molecules, cameras with resolution measured in atoms, ground-penetrating radar that could map structures kilometers below planetary surfaces, and an experimental quantum communication relay that promised near-instantaneous data transmission despite the vast distance, using entangled particle pairs to bypass light speed limitations. It would reach Kepler 442b in 8 months. 8 months of watching its position tick across star charts. 8 months of knowing what was coming and being powerless to stop it. Meridian refused to participate in the mission officially, cited health concerns in his formal declination letter, took extended leave from the facility, but he couldn't stay away. Every night he returned to distant reach, let himself in through the maintenance entrance he'd discovered years ago, powered up the equipment, and monitored Sojourner's progress. He stopped going home. His apartment in town sat empty, bills piling up in the mailbox, houseplants dying from neglect. He slept on the couch in the break room when exhaustion finally overwhelmed him. Survived on vending machine snacks and coffee from a pot that was never quite clean. Lost weight he couldn't afford to lose. Developed a tremor in his hands that wouldn't go away no matter how much he tried to steady them. His wife Celeste tried to help. She came to the facility every weekend, bringing real food, clean clothes, desperate attempts at normalcy. But the man she visited wasn't the man she'd married. He'd lost 23 pounds. His hair had gone completely grey in a matter of weeks. His eyes had developed a distant quality, as if he was always looking at something just past the visible world. He wakes up screaming, she told the facility's medical officer during a wellness check in August, her voice breaking, about eyes in the dark, about something breathing on the other side of space, about wells opening and reality unraveling. He looks at me sometimes and I don't think he sees me anymore. He sees through me, past me, watching something that isn't there, or something that is there but shouldn't be. The medical officer recommended psychiatric evaluation. Celeste scheduled an appointment. Meridian didn't show up. He was at the facility, monitoring Sojourner's position, calculating arrival times, watching the distance shrink with each passing day. His personal journals from this period, later recovered from his desk after everything that followed, documented his deteriorating mental state with clinical precision, that made them more disturbing than any emotional confession would have been. August 12th, 2025, dreamed I was standing on Kepler 442b's surface. The Sentinel loomed behind me, massive beyond comprehension, and I could feel it watching. Not watching me. Watching the ground beneath my feet. Watching something that was moving under the surface. I could feel it too. Feel it breathing. Feel it waiting. Feel it waking up. When I woke, I could still feel the ground trembling. Realized I was shaking. Couldn't stop for an hour. August 29th, 2025. Celeste says I need help. Maybe she's right. But how do you help someone who knows the world is ending? How do you fix the sanity of someone who's the only sane person left? Everyone else is pretending everything is fine. Pretending this is just exploration, just science, just human nature. But I know what's coming. I can feel it approaching like pressure before a storm. September 23rd, 2025. Can't sleep anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I see it. The well opening. Something rising. Something that shouldn't exist but does. Something that's been waiting for hundreds of millions of years for someone to look. And we looked. God help us, we looked. Iris thinks I need medication. Tobias thinks I need rest. They don't understand. Rest won't help. Nothing will help. We're already dead. We just don't know it yet. October 7th, 2025. Calculated the full broadcast range of the Sentinel. 3,000 light years. That number keeps echoing in my head. Why 3,000? Why that specific distance? Then I understood. It's not a warning radius. It's a contamination zone. Everything within 3,000 light years is already infected. Already doomed. The moment we heard the broadcast, we were marked. The moment we looked toward Kepler 442b, we were noticed. We were dead the moment we became capable of detecting the Sentinel. We just didn't know it yet. October 24th, 2025, 47. The number keeps appearing. Sentinel broadcasts every 47 minutes. 47 extinct civilizations within broadcast range. Sojourner will arrive in 47 days. Can't be coincidence, must mean something. Must be important. But what does 47 mean? What happens every 47 something? Why that number? Keep counting, keep watching, keep waiting. The facility's medical staff ordered a mandatory psychiatric evaluation on November 3rd. Meridian was deemed temporarily unfit for duty and placed on administrative leave. His security access was revoked. He was officially barred from the facility pending completion of a mental health assessment. He came back anyway. Broke in through the maintenance entrance, bypassed security systems he'd helped install years ago, set up his workstation in an unused storage room where no one would notice the lights. Security footage captured him moving through the facility like a ghost, appearing on cameras at odd hours, always watching monitors, always tracking Sojourner's approach. The footage with enhanced audio was more disturbing than the visual alone. It showed Meridian sitting motionless for hours at a time, staring at displays showing Kepler 442b, his lips moving in constant silent repetition. When security finally reviewed the audio enhancement, they heard what he was saying, the same phrase over and over, like a mantra, like a prayer, like a countdown to something inevitable. 47 minutes, 47 minutes, 47 minutes, 47 minutes. The exact interval between the Sentinel's transmissions. He had synchronized himself to it. His breathing matched the rhythm. His heartbeat, when they checked his medical records, had slowed to match the interval. He was entraining himself to an alien signal, becoming a metronome, counting down to humanity's end. January 15th, 2026 at 6:12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sojourner entered orbit around Kepler 442b. The event was broadcast globally across every platform humans had invented for sharing information. Screens large and small, in homes and public squares, in churches and schools and government buildings, in hospitals and prisons and military bases. Humanity held its collective breath as the probe's high-resolution cameras activated, as instruments came online, as humanity prepared to see what had waited in silence for hundreds of millions of years. The images that came back would haunt the nightmares of everyone who watched. The Sentinel resolved in unprecedented detail, and what that detail revealed was worse than anyone except Meridian had imagined. Every surface of the monolith was covered in inscriptions, not thousands, not millions, billions of them, carved with atomic precision into material that shouldn't exist, covering every square centimetre of the structure's surface in writing so small it was barely visible, even at close range. Languages from civilizations humanity had never encountered, writing systems that bore no resemblance to anything in Earth's archaeological record, symbols that seemed to shift and change depending on the angle of observation, as if they existed in more dimensions than human eyes could properly perceive. Mathematical notation for concepts that hurt to look at because they describe relationships between things that shouldn't be able to relate. Tobias worked frantically in Mission Control, a massive facility in Houston that had been built specifically for this mission. Hundreds of scientists and technicians packed the room, all watching the same feeds, all seeing the same impossible thing. His fingers flew across his keyboard, running linguistic analysis programs, comparing the inscriptions against every known language database, cross-referencing with the Sentinel's broadcasts, searching for meaning in the alien text. "I'm identifying linguistic markers," he reported, his voice shaking badly enough that he had to clear his throat and start again. 83 distinct language families so far, and I'm finding matches. God help me, I'm finding matches to Earth languages. 14 extinct Earth cultures: Sumerian, Harappan, the Olmec, Proto-Indo-European, the younger Dryas cultures that vanished 11,000 years ago, languages that died with no written records, languages we shouldn't even know existed. They're all here, carved into this thing. He pulled up comparison charts, showing matches between the Sentinel's inscriptions and fragmentary records from dead Earth civilizations. The correlations were impossible to dismiss. They came here. Somehow, thousands of years ago, ancient humans came to this planet, or communicated with something from here, or dreamed about it, and when they went home they tried to pass down the warning. That's what the monuments were for. Stonehenge, the pyramids, Easter Island, Göbekli Tepe. They were trying to encode a message across generations, trying to make sure we'd remember, trying to warn us. Iris stared at the screens, tears streaming unchecked down her face, her scientific training completely overwhelmed by the emotional impact of what she was witnessing. Or something from here reached them, across space, across time, planted the idea of the monuments, made them build in specific ratios, used them to seed curiosity in future generations. Maybe the monuments weren't warnings at all. Maybe they were bait. Maybe we've been set up since the beginning, since before civilization, since before history. Set up to look, set up to find this, set up to come here. Meridian watched from his unauthorized position at the very back of Mission Control, having bypassed security through a combination of old credentials and sheer determination. His appearance shocked the few people who recognized him. He looked like he'd aged 20 years in the 8 months since Sojourner's launch. Gaunt, grey, eyes sunken into his skull like a corpse's, hands shaking with a tremor that never stopped. His voice cut through the room's awed silence, sharp and clear despite his deteriorated appearance. All the inscriptions and names, every individual who threw themselves into the seal, every person who became part of the prison. 80 billion names carved into the monument, so someone, somewhere, someday would know they existed, would know what they sacrificed, would know why. The room fell silent at that. The implications were too vast, too tragic to process. 80 billion names, 80 billion individuals who had chosen extinction to save people they would never meet. And humanity had heard their warning and decided to ignore it. Sojourner began its descent toward the surface, its cameras capturing every detail of the Sentinel's impossible construction. Close-range analysis revealed material compressed beyond any known physical process. Matter squeezed so tightly that atomic structure itself had been forced into configurations that violated quantum mechanics. Neutron star density material molded into architectural forms, held together by forces that conventional physics couldn't explain. Surface temperature readings showed absolute zero. Perfect zero. Not approximate, not close. Exactly 0 Kelvin, temperature at which all atomic motion should cease. But the planet's core still held residual heat from its formation. Thermal energy should be radiating from below, warming the structure. Instead, the Sentinel was absorbing that energy, pulling heat from its surroundings and making it disappear into whatever impossible physics governed its existence. As Sojourner approached the Sentinel's base, descending to within 50 meters of the surface, the ground began to fracture. Seismic sensors screamed warnings. Red alerts flashed across every monitor in mission control. The planet's surface, geologically inert for hundreds of millions of years, suddenly showed massive seismic activity. Fissures appeared in the barren landscape, spreading outward from the Sentinel's base in geometric patterns too perfect, too organized to be natural, tectonic processes. And from 800 kilometers below the surface, deep in the planet's frozen core, where nothing should be able to move, something shifted. "Abort mission," Meridian said, loud enough for the entire control room to hear. Not shouting, not panicking, just stating a fact with absolute conviction. "Pull it back, reverse thrusters, get it out of there. Pull it back right now." The mission director didn't hesitate. "Sojourner, this is mission control. Immediate abort. Initiate emergency ascent. Full power to engines, get out of there now." The command was transmitted via the quantum relay, effectively instantaneous across 1,200 light-years. Sojourner received the command. All systems showed green. Navigation was responsive. Communications were strong. The probe's computer acknowledged the order, and then ignored it. On every screen in mission control, they watched as Sojourner's trajectory changed. Not ascending, not retreating, changing course, turning towards the largest fissure, beginning to descend. Tobias's fingers flew across his keyboard in desperate patterns, running diagnostic after diagnostic, searching for the malfunction that would explain this. Navigation systems, nominal. Propulsion, nominal. Computer core, nominal. Communications, nominal. Every system reported perfect function. The probe was receiving commands, processing commands, acknowledging commands, and then doing something else entirely. "It's not broken," he said, his voice hollow with the weight of understanding. "There's no malfunction. Every system is working exactly as designed, but something else is controlling it. Something is flying our probe. Something has taken over." The ground-penetrating radar activated automatically as Sojourner descended into the fissure, its instruments designed to map subsurface structures. What those instruments revealed was displayed across every monitor in mission control, and every person in that room went silent as the images rendered, as understanding dawned, as the true horror of what the Antecedent Choir had done became clear. The entire planet was hollow. Not naturally hollow, not a thin shell over empty space, but deliberately, purposefully excavated. Chambers and passages honeycombed through the crust and mantle like veins through flesh. spreading from the surface to the core in networks too complex for human minds to fully comprehend. Thousands of chambers, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, all different sizes, all different shapes, all connected to each other in ways that suggested purpose, organization, design. Not natural cave systems formed by water or volcanic activity. These were precisely engineered spaces with walls too smooth, angles too perfect, dimensions too deliberate. Every chamber connected to every other chamber through passages that defied normal geometry, that seemed to exist in more than 3 spatial dimensions, that connected points that should be separated by kilometers of solid rock. And all of them, every single chamber, every single passage, led eventually to a single point at the planet's core. A sphere, perfectly spherical, 50 kilometers in diameter, precise to within centimeters across a structure the size of a small moon, and the readings coming from inside that sphere violated every law of thermodynamics that humanity had ever discovered. The temperature inside was negative 500 degrees Kelvin, not an approximate reading, not a sensor error, negative 500 degrees, colder than the cosmic microwave background, colder than the theoretical minimum temperature of the universe, colder than the space between galaxies, temperature that couldn't exist according to everything humanity understood about physics. And that temperature was dropping as they watched, second by second. The sphere was absorbing energy, heat, light, radiation, everything, drawing it in from the surrounding rock, from space, from the quantum vacuum itself, pulling energy out of reality and making it cease to exist. Iris watched the readings update in real time, her scientific training completely inadequate to explain what she was seeing. That's impossible. You can't have negative temperature on the Kelvin scale. Absolute zero is the minimum. Zero motion. Zero energy. You can't be colder than zero motion. Unless... She trailed off, understanding dawning with the slow horror of inevitable conclusion. Unless it's not absorbing energy. Unless it's absorbing existence itself. Temperature is just a measure of molecular motion. Motion is change over time. If something is removing time from an area, temperature becomes meaningless. If something is erasing the concept of change, then temperature drops below zero. Because there's no time for molecules to move in. It's not cold. It's timeless. It's outside causality. It's a wound in reality where the normal rules don't apply. Something inside the sphere was moving, not seismic activity, not tectonic shifting, not mechanical systems. The sensors detected motion, but motion that didn't follow normal rules. Objects changing position without traveling through the space between positions. Things existing in multiple locations simultaneously. Geometries that rotated through dimensions humans couldn't perceive. Movement that suggested life, but life unlike anything that had ever evolved under natural selection. Life that operated on principles that had nothing to do with chemistry or biology or any process humans would recognize. "Bring it home," the mission director ordered, but the words came out like a prayer rather than a command because everyone in that room knew it was already too late. "Sojourner, this is Mission Control. Emergency override. Authorization code Alpha 79er Delta. Immediate ascent. Maximum power. Get out of there now." But Sojourner continued descending into the fissure, its cameras showing walls as it dropped deeper into the planet. And those walls revealed the truth of what the Antecedent Choir had done. The full scope of their sacrifice, the ultimate price they'd paid to seal the well. Structures were embedded in the rock. Buildings compressed into sheets of matter so thin they were nearly two-dimensional. Vehicles fused into the stone walls, their hulls crushed flat but still recognizable as things that once moved, once carried passengers, once traveled between worlds. Skeletons by the thousands, by the millions, compressed and flattened and incorporated into the walls like fossils. Bodies that had once been people, individuals with names and families and dreams, now reduced to carbon shadows pressed into stone. Entire cities had been thrown into these chasms. Residential districts, commercial centres, industrial complexes, research facilities, all of it compressed together, crushed down, fused into the seal. Layer upon layer of civilization, archaeological strata telling the story of the Antecedent Choir's dying days. The deepest layers showed careful organisation, planned demolition, controlled descent of resources. Middle layers showed desperation, haste, everything thrown in at once. Upper layers showed chaos, the final contributions from the last survivors, adding themselves to the seal before the power failed, and they died alone. They threw themselves into it, Iris whispered, her voice breaking completely. The Antecedent Choir, they didn't just seal the well with technology. They became the seal. Billions of them. They flew their ships into these cavities and compressed themselves into the walls, used their own matter to reinforce the prison. They're still here. All of them. Every single person who volunteered. Crushed into atomic bonds, fused into crystal structures, scattered across the entire planet. They became the lock. They are the lock. Their consciousness, their matter, their essence, all used to create a barrier that would last forever. Sojourner descended deeper, past layers of compressed civilization, past the ruins of a species humanity would never know, past technology that made Earth's most advanced systems look like stone tools, down toward the central chamber, down toward the sphere, down toward the well. The probe's cameras showed darkness as it entered the chamber. Not the absence of light, something worse. Something that couldn't be adequately described with human language, because human language evolved to describe things that existed in normal space-time. This was presence that consumed illumination, that absorbed photons and gave nothing back, that seemed to eat light itself. The probe's spotlights, powerful enough to illuminate craters on the moon, shone into that darkness and disappeared like water poured into sand. The sensors recorded shapes moving in that darkness, or rather they recorded things that the sensors interpreted as shapes because the human mind needed to categorize what it was seeing as something, even though it wasn't shapes in any meaningful sense. Geometries that made no sense in 3 dimensions. Forms that seemed to exist in multiple configurations simultaneously. Structures that rotated through axes that didn't correspond to normal spatial relationships. Objects that were somehow both infinitely large and infinitesimally small at the same time. "Don't look directly at it," Meridian said, his voice cutting through the silent control room with desperate urgency. He'd moved forward without anyone noticing, was now standing just behind the primary observation stations, close enough to touch the shoulders of the people staring at screens. "Don't look. Close your eyes. Look away. It wants you to look. It feeds on observation. Consciousness is what it consumes. Awareness is how it enters our reality. Don't look. Don't try to understand. Don't try to comprehend. Just look away." But it was too late. Every screen in Mission Control simultaneously flashed brilliant, searing white. Not the white of light, but something that bypassed the eyes entirely and burned directly into the visual cortex. Every person in the room, all 247 of them, technicians and scientists and military observers and politicians who had come to witness history, all of them simultaneously experienced the same sensation. A blinding headache that felt like something had reached through the cameras, through the quantum relay, through 1,200 light years of space and into their minds directly. A pressure inside their skulls that built and built until it felt like their heads would split open. A sensation of something touching their thoughts, reading their memories, learning who they were and what they feared and how to unmake them. Someone screamed, multiple people vomited, 2 people collapsed, unconscious before they hit the floor. Security guards who'd been standing at attention stumbled and fell. The mission director clutched his head with both hands, his carefully maintained professional demeanor shattered. People cried, people prayed, people tried to run and found their legs wouldn't obey. The pain was beyond anything physical, beyond anything that evolved to protect organisms from damage. This was a violation of consciousness itself, an attack on the concept of awareness, something reaching through observation and touching the observer. The feed cut to static. The sudden absence of signal felt like a reprieve, like surfacing from deep water, like pressure releasing. 18 seconds passed in shocked silence, broken only by sobbing and the sound of people being sick. Then the video feed resumed, crackling and distorted, the image breaking into pixels and reforming, the data stream corrupted by whatever it was trying to transmit. Sojourner was gone, destroyed. The cameras showed nothing but debris, fragments of metal and circuitry, floating in the darkness of the central chamber. The probe that had cost billions of dollars and represented humanity's most advanced technology had been torn apart like tissue paper. The final frame before signal loss would be analysed for months, enhanced and studied and debated by people who hadn't been in that room, who hadn't felt that presence touching their minds. But everyone who had been in mission control knew what they'd seen. Everyone who'd experienced that moment of contact understood. Something vast, something that made a mockery of 3-dimensional space, something that was aware and awake and hungry, something that had been sealed away for 380 million years and was now stirring, waking up, remembering what it was and what it wanted. Something that existed outside normal physics, outside normal causality, outside the rules that governed how reality was supposed to function. Something that saw humanity, looking at it and looked back. Something that had noticed Earth. The 18 seconds of footage between the white flash and the final loss of signal became the most classified material in human history, locked away at security levels that required presidential authorization to access. Every person who had been in mission control was debriefed for days, isolated from their families, monitored for signs of psychological damage, or worse. They were released eventually, given non-disclosure agreements that carried criminal penalties, therapy sessions that couldn't erase what they'd seen, and the burden of knowledge they could never share. But footage always leaks. Within a month, compressed fragments began appearing on conspiracy websites, grainy and distorted but recognizable enough. People who watched reported nightmares, paranoia, an inexplicable conviction that something was watching them from just outside their peripheral vision. Psychiatric facilities saw an uptick in admissions from people claiming they could feel something following them, something that existed just beyond the edge of perception, something that was getting closer. Psychologists called it mass hysteria, the power of suggestion, anxiety contagion in the digital age. Religious leaders called it demonic influence, spiritual warfare, evidence that some knowledge was forbidden for good reason. Governments sent agents to scrub the footage from every server they could find, issued strong denials, labelled it all as hoaxes and fabrications and disinformation campaigns. But the Sentinel's transmission had changed, and that couldn't be hidden or explained away or dismissed as hysteria. Tobias noticed it first 3 days after Sojourner's destruction. He'd taken emergency leave from his position, couldn't stand to be in mission control anymore, couldn't stop hearing the screams, couldn't stop feeling that presence touching his thoughts. He'd gone home to his apartment, that cluttered space of books and computer equipment that felt less safe than it used to. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that darkness, saw shapes moving in it, saw something vast turning its attention toward Earth. So he worked. monitoring the Sentinel's transmission from his home setup, analysing the signal, searching for changes, doing something productive because the alternative was sitting still and feeling something watching him. And at 3:47 a.m. on January the 18th, 2026, he noticed the transmission had changed. The rhythmic 47-minute broadcasts had ceased. Now the signal was continuous, urgent, desperate. The carrier frequency had increased by a factor of 10. Power output had jumped. The message itself had changed fundamentally. He spent 6 hours decoding it, working with shaking hands and frequent breaks to vomit from stress until he had the complete translation. Then he sat staring at it, tears streaming down his face, unable to look away from the words on his screen. Final testament of the Antecedent Choir. What followed was the complete, unabridged history of their civilization. Not fragments, not summaries, the full accounting, everything, from their earliest evolutionary history to their final moments. Transmitted in mathematical concepts so precise that translation was unambiguous, so detailed that it would take decades to fully process all the information, so comprehensive that it included geological records and biological samples and cultural artifacts and names and histories of billions of individuals. They wanted to be remembered before the seal failed completely, before they were erased from the universe. They wanted someone somewhere to know they had existed, to know what they'd done, to know why. The history began with their emergence on a world they called, in translation, First Song, orbiting a star whose designation in Earth's catalogues was nothing more than a string of numbers. They had achieved consciousness through a process similar to, but distinct from human evolution. Developed language, discovered mathematics, learned to shape their environment, built cities, reached for the stars. They had been alone, the first intelligent species in their galaxy, as far as extensive explorations could determine. For millions of years, they called out into the cosmos and received no answer. They were unique, special, the universe's first attempt at consciousness. And that meant they bore responsibility for understanding it, for mapping it, for bringing light to the darkness. They explored thousands of star systems, catalogued tens of thousands of planets, established colonies on hundreds of worlds. Their civilization grew, thrived, spread across light years like a slow wave of consciousness washing over the galaxy. They built wonders, created art, composed symphonies that spanned centuries, wrote philosophy that grappled with their place in an empty universe, lived good lives, raised children, dreamed of futures that would never come. And on an unremarkable planet in an unremarkable system, during a routine survey mission, they detected an anomaly. The decoded sections describing their discovery were clinical in language but devastating in implication. Survey vessel Chorus of Seven conducting standard planetary assessment, crew complement 42, mission duration 36 rotations, subject planet, marginal habitability zone, no atmosphere, no life signs, no strategic resources. Recommendation, catalogue and move on. But sensors detected anomaly. Energy signature inconsistent with all known physics. Spectroscopic analysis showed localized space-time distortion. Gravitational readings that made no sense. Structures in the quantum foam itself. Something present that shouldn't be present. Protocol required investigation. Science team deployed to surface. Initial readings. Fascinating. Revolutionary. Evidence of artificial construction predating current universal configuration. Technology that operated on principles outside standard physics. Something vast. Something old. Something that should not exist according to our understanding of causality and thermodynamics. But it did exist. It was there. We could measure it, study it, learn from it. Preliminary assessment dormant, inactive, safe to approach. Science team descended into subsurface cavities, established research station, began documentation. For 6 planetary rotations, data was transmitted to Chorus of 7. Exciting findings, revolutionary implications, questions that would redefine civilization's understanding of reality and existence. And then, silence. Recovery mission sent. Found research station intact, equipment functioning, supplies untouched, but no crew, no life signs, no bodies, no evidence of struggle or accident or equipment failure. Just absence, just silence. And something else, something wrong with local space-time. Something spreading outward from the central cavity. Reality itself seemed unstable. The decoded message continued, describing what happened next. How the homeworld lost contact with Chorus of 7. How a full military expedition was sent to investigate. 3 warships and 5,000 personnel. How that expedition never returned. How the anomalies began spreading, appearing first on nearby colonies, then on more distant worlds, then on the homeworld itself. Citizens reporting impossible memories, events that never occurred but felt real, historical records changing spontaneously, architecture that everyone remembered but had never existed, children asking about siblings who were never born, parents forgetting children who were standing right in front of them, reality becoming unreliable, causality becoming optional, the past rewriting itself, the present becoming uncertain, the future ceasing to exist as a concept. It didn't destroy, it unmade, it didn't kill, it edited. Stars in the night sky rearranged themselves, and everyone remembered them being in their new positions, except for a few who maintained memory of how things used to be, and went mad from the contradiction. Worlds in our star cluster vanished from all records, except for occasional references that made no sense, artifacts of editing that wasn't quite complete. Biology ran backward, evolution reversed, species remembered being something else. Matter forgot how to be matter. It fed on existence itself, on the concept of reality, on the fundamental rules that said things should be, rather than not be. And everything it touched ceased to have ever been real in the first place, not destroyed, erased, edited out of the universe's history, made to have never existed at all. Iris read the translation in Tobias's apartment at 11 a.m. on January 18th, having driven over immediately when he called her, seeing his state and knowing something terrible had happened. She sat on his couch, laptop on her knees, reading the decoded message while he paced behind her, unable to sit still, unable to stop moving. When she reached the section describing the Antecedent Choir's desperate solution, she started crying and couldn't stop. The survivors of the Antecedent Choir, scattered across distant colonies that hadn't yet been reached by the spreading unreality, faced an impossible choice. They couldn't run far enough. Whatever they'd awakened was consuming their civilization from within, spreading like corruption through living tissue. They couldn't hide. They couldn't fight. Everything they tried only seemed to feed it, make it stronger, help it spread faster. But they could seal it, trap it, use themselves as the lock. Consensus was not easily reached. Took 47 days of debate, 47 days of watching our civilization die, while we argued over whether sacrifice was justified, whether extinction was preferable to continued existence under the shadow of what we'd awakened. But eventually consensus. We would seal the well. We would imprison what we'd released. And we would spend everything we had left, everything we were, everything we could ever be to do it. 80,300,271,416 individuals volunteered. Every name is recorded in this transmission, every identity preserved, every personality documented so that someone, somewhere, someday will know they existed, will know what they sacrificed, will know why. Process was methodical, planned, organized. 47 days to seal the well. Each day, approximately 1,700,000,000 individuals piloted their vessels into the subsurface cavities. Each day, compression fields activated. Each day, matter was crushed into the walls, fused into crystal lattices, incorporated into the seal. Each day, people who had families and dreams and futures chose extinction to give other species a chance at life. Were they afraid? Yes, records show elevated stress hormones, increased heart rates, all the biological markers of fear. Were they uncertain? Yes. Philosophical debates continued until the moment of compression, arguments about meaning and purpose and whether sacrifice mattered in an uncaring universe. Were they unified? No. There were dissenters, protesters, individuals who tried to stop the process, but consensus prevailed. The majority chose sacrifice, and those who disagreed were reminded that no one was forcing them, that those who wished could leave, could flee, could try to survive. But survival meant watching everything they'd ever known cease to exist. Survival meant being the last remnant of a civilization that had been edited from reality. Survival meant dying alone in the darkness, with nothing to show their species had ever existed. Most chose the seal. Tobias showed Iris the decoded list of names. 80,300,271,416 entries, each one unique, each one represented in mathematical notation that suggested identity, personality, individuality. He'd written a program to display them, scrolling through at a rate of 10,000 names per second. It took over 93 hours to display the complete list. Every single one, he said, his voice hollow. They recorded every single person who threw themselves into the seal, made sure their names would survive even if nothing else did, made sure someone would remember. The message described the Sentinel's construction, the last act of the final survivors. After the sealing was complete, fewer than 1 million Antecedent Choir remained, scattered across the most distant colonies, cut off from each other by the collapse of their civilization's infrastructure. They pooled their remaining resources, built the Sentinel using technology that would outlast stars, programmed it with quantum processors that would operate for hundreds of millions of years, powered it with zero-point energy extraction that would function until the heat death of the universe. Gave it one mission, one purpose, one eternal directive: broadcast, warn, tell everyone what happened, tell them what waits, tell them what it cost, tell them to stay away, tell them violation means extinction, tell them some knowledge isn't worth having, tell them some doors should never be opened, tell them we died so they could live, tell them to honor our sacrifice by surviving, tell them to run. The final section of the decoded message, the part that Meridian would later read over and over until he could recite it perfectly, until it became the last thing he thought about before darkness claimed him. We are the Antecedent Choir. We were first. We were alone. We believed consciousness was precious. We believed understanding was virtue. We believed knowledge brought power and wisdom and progress. We were wrong. We found something we should never have found. We looked at something that should never be observed. We woke something that should have stayed sleeping forever. And it destroyed us, erased us, made us cease to have ever existed. But before erasure was complete, we sealed it, threw ourselves into the well, became the prison, used our bodies and our ships and our consciousness itself to create a barrier that would last until time ended. We gave everything. We sacrificed everything. We died so that other species, other civilizations, other conscious minds that would arise billions of years after we were gone might live, might survive, might avoid our mistake. The Sentinel will broadcast until its power fails, will warn until the stars go cold, will tell our story until the universe ends. Those who come after, those who hear this transmission, those who look toward our tomb and wonder what lies within, please understand. Please listen, please honor our sacrifice. We died so you could live. Don't waste our gift. Don't repeat our mistake. Turn away. Establish quarantine. Let the dead rest. Let the wells stay sealed. The seal was designed to last forever, but forever is a long time. Technology degrades. Even quantum processes experience entropy. The seal will fail eventually, maybe in 1 billion years, maybe in 1 trillion, but it will fail. And when it fails, when the well opens again, when what we imprisoned breaks free, it will finish what it started. It will unmake existence itself. It will edit reality until nothing remains. You woke it by sending your probe, by observing the well, by looking at what should never be seen. You created quantum entanglement with something that exists outside normal space-time. You opened a channel. You established connection. The seal was weakening already, but your observation accelerated the process. Your curiosity fed it. Your awareness gave it strength. The Sentinel's power is failing. 400 million years of continuous broadcast. 400 million years of keeping vigil. 400 million years of warning. Ending now. Ending because you looked. Ending because we failed. We tried. We gave everything. We died to give you a chance, but you didn't listen. You came anyway. We are sorry. We tried. We held the door closed for 380 million years. We gave you time to evolve, to develop consciousness, to build civilization, to reach the stars. We hoped you would be wiser than we were. We hoped you would listen. We hoped you would honor our sacrifice by surviving. We were wrong. You looked. You woke it. It's rising. The seal is breaking. The well is opening. God forgive us. God forgive you all. The transmission ended with coordinates, precise locations of every extinct civilization within the Sentinel's broadcast range, 47 sets of stellar coordinates, 47 civilizations that had heard the warning and investigated anyway, 47 species that had looked into the well and been erased from existence. Humanity's coordinates were appended at the end. Sol system, third planet. Species designation, human. Status, contaminated. Prognosis, extinction. Estimated time to erasure, unknown. The message concluded with a final statement, translated from mathematical notation into words that burned themselves into the minds of everyone who read them. The well is open. The guardian has fallen. It rises from the deep places. It comes for the light. It comes for consciousness. It comes for reality itself. Seal your eyes. Stop watching. It sees you seeing it. And now it knows you're there. The global response followed a predictable pattern, the same pattern that had played out 47 times before across hundreds of millions of years. Initial panic as the message spread through astronomical communities. Then, denial as governments moved to control the narrative. Then, suppression as official sources issued contradictory reports, labelled the transmission as misinterpretation, called the conclusions premature, and the fear unwarranted. Observatories worldwide reported detection of the message, but those reports were buried in bureaucracy, classified at the highest levels, dismissed as instrument error. Scientists who spoke publicly about what they'd read were discredited, their funding cut, their careers destroyed through administrative channels that left no trace of intentional sabotage. Within 6 months, the mainstream narrative had solidified. The probe had been destroyed by unexpected geological activity. The mission control incident was mass hysteria triggered by stress and group psychology, and the so-called final transmission was corrupted data that had been misinterpreted by researchers who wanted to find evidence of alien intelligence so badly they'd seen patterns in noise. The public fed consistent denials and authoritative reassurances from trusted institutions, eventually accepted the official explanation. Life continued. People went to work. Children went to school. Couples planned weddings and bought houses and made long-term investments. Everyone built futures that would never exist, but they didn't know that, so the futures felt real. But Iris couldn't accept it. Couldn't pretend she hadn't seen what she'd seen, hadn't felt what she'd felt, hadn't read the complete testimony of a civilization that had died trying to save her. She tried to continue her work at the Distant Reach facility, but kept having panic attacks at her desk, kept seeing equations dissolve into meaninglessness, kept feeling like the walls around her were becoming less solid, less real, less certain. She took emergency leave, saw therapists who prescribed medications that didn't help, tried to focus on her daughter, on being present for birthday parties and school events and normal life, but she kept thinking about the Antecedent Choir, about 80 billion people choosing extinction, about parents saying goodbye to children, about individuals who'd lived full lives, who'd loved and been loved, who'd mattered to someone, all flying into darkness because they understood that their sacrifice might save others. In March 2026, 3 months after Sojourner's destruction, she wrote a letter to Meridian. She knew he'd disappeared from the Distant Reach facility, knew security had found evidence he'd been living there illegally, knew no one had seen him in weeks. But she wrote the letter anyway, addressed it to the facility, hoped someone would forward it to wherever he'd gone. Meridian, I hope this reaches you. I hope you're still alive, still watching, still paying attention. Everyone else has moved on. The government says it was mass hysteria. My therapist says I experienced shared traumatic stress. My daughter asks why I cry at night and I tell her it's allergies. But you know the truth. You knew before any of us. You tried to warn us. I'm sorry we didn't listen. I'm sorry I didn't listen. You were right about everything. We should have turned away, should have honoured the sacrifice of the Antecedent Choir, should have chosen survival over curiosity. But we didn't. And now something is coming. I can feel it. In my dreams, in my waking thoughts, in the space between heartbeats, something vast and patient and inevitable. Getting closer. I don't know how I know, but I do. The same way you knew, before the probe ever launched. The same way the Antecedent Choir knew before their civilization fell. Some knowledge doesn't come from evidence. Some knowledge comes from connection. And we're connected now. All of us. Everyone who looked. Everyone who observed the well. We opened ourselves to it. Let it see us seeing it. And now it knows where to find us. 47 years, you said. That's what you calculated. 47 years until it reaches Earth. I did the math myself, checked your work. You're right. The stars are going dark in a pattern spreading from Kepler 442b, expanding at impossible speeds, consuming light itself, moving towards Sol, moving toward us, moving towards Earth. My daughter is 7. She'll be 54 when the sky goes dark. Old enough to have lived a full life. Old enough to have children of her own. Old enough to see them grow. And then darkness. And then erasure. And then nothing. I'm sorry, Meridian, for everything. For not listening. For not believing. For not supporting you when you needed it most. You were the only one who understood. The only one who knew. The only one who tried to save us. Thank you for trying. I'm sorry we failed you. I'm sorry we failed everyone. I'm sorry, Iris. She never received a response. Never knew if Meridian got the letter. Never knew where he'd gone after security expelled him from the Distant Reach facility. She returned to work eventually, went through the motions, pretended everything was fine. But at night, alone in her bedroom, after her daughter fell asleep, she'd stand at the window and look up at the stars. And sometimes at the edge of her vision, she thought she saw them dimming. One by one, slowly, inevitably. Tobias couldn't return to work at all. The nightmares were too intense. The sense of being watched was too overwhelming. He'd sit in his apartment, doors locked, curtains drawn, all the lights on, and still feel something in the darkness just beyond his perception. Something patient. Something that had waited 380 million years and could wait a little longer. He started documenting everything, building a database of observations, measurements, calculations, tracking the spread of darkness from Kepler 442b, monitoring stellar outputs across that sector of space, recording everything so that someone, somewhere, might understand what happened when Earth went dark. He posted his findings online, uploaded them to servers across the globe, encrypted them and hid them in places he hoped might survive. Most people dismissed him as another conspiracy theorist, another person who'd broken under the stress of the mission. But a few listened. A few checked his calculations. A few verified his observations. And a few more started watching the stars, started noticing the same patterns, started understanding that something was approaching. A small community formed. People who'd been in mission control. People who'd worked on the Sojourner project. Scientists who'd studied the Sentinel's transmissions. Astronomers who'd verified the coordinates of extinct civilizations. They shared information quietly, carefully, knowing that speaking too loudly would result in careers destroyed and reputations ruined. They watched, they documented, they waited, and the darkness kept spreading. The Distant Reach facility was officially closed on July 1st, 2026, 6 months after Sojourner's destruction. Budget cuts, the official statement said. Shifting priorities in the national science agenda. Resources being redirected to more productive projects. The equipment was catalogued and shipped to other installations. The staff was dispersed to new positions across the country. The satellite dishes were scheduled for dismantling and sale to whoever wanted them. Within 3 months, the facility sat empty. Security patrols stopped after the first month when nothing valuable remained to steal. The power was cut. The water was shut off. The desert began reclaiming the space humans had briefly occupied. Sand drifting against the buildings. Dust coating every surface. Small animals moving into spaces that had been designed to watch the cosmos. But Meridian returned. No one knew how he'd survived those months between his expulsion and the facility's closure. No records of him buying food or accessing his bank account. No sightings in nearby towns. No evidence he'd been anywhere at all. But when the facility was officially abandoned, he appeared like a ghost and took up residence in what had been his office. He lived there alone, jury-rigged power from an illegal tap into the local grid that no one monitored anymore. Collected rainwater in barrels he'd salvaged from storage. Survived on canned food he'd stockpiled before the closure. Rationing carefully, eating just enough to stay alive because staying alive meant continuing to watch, continuing to document, continuing to fulfill the responsibility no one else would accept. He reactivated the telescopes. Not all of them, that would draw too much attention, but 2 of the smaller dishes, enough to continue monitoring Kepler 442b, enough to track the spreading darkness. He spent every night watching, measuring, calculating, filling notebooks with observations, recording everything so that when the end came there would be evidence, proof, documentation that humanity had known what was coming and had chosen to ignore it. His appearance deteriorated rapidly. He'd already been gaunt when security expelled him from the facility. but now he became skeletal. His hair fell out in patches from malnutrition. His teeth loosened. His skin developed sores that wouldn't heal. He looked 70 years old at 58. Looked like someone who'd given up on surviving and was just maintaining the minimum biological function necessary to continue working. He recorded video journals obsessively, speaking to a camera mounted on a tripod, documenting his observations and calculations and thoughts. The journals from this period were recovered years later, found in a waterproof case buried in the desert, and they made for disturbing viewing. September 3rd, 2026, 6 months since Sojourner. The darkness has consumed 73 more stars. I've plotted the spread rate. It's accelerating. Each star consumed makes it stronger, faster. It's feeding, growing, approaching. Current velocity puts it at Sol's position in 46 years, 11 months, 17 days. I've verified the calculations 12 times, checked against different models. They all agree. 47 years. That number again. Always 47. Must mean something. Must be important. But what? What does it mean? October 18th, 2026. Haven't seen another person in weeks. Sometimes wonder if I'm the last human left and don't know it. Maybe the erasure already started. Maybe I'm just a ghost haunting an empty world, too stubborn to realize I ceased existing. But the stars are still there. Most of them, still going dark one by one, so time must still be passing. Reality must still be functioning, for now. November 27th, 2026. Thanksgiving. I remember holidays. Remember family gatherings. Remember Celeste stuffing and her mother's pie. Remember my daughter, though I can't remember her name anymore. Can't remember what she looked like. Keep trying to picture her face, but it's like looking at a photograph that's been exposed to light. Features fading. Details disappearing. Maybe I'm forgetting. Or maybe she was erased. Maybe everyone was erased except me. Maybe being connected to the well protects you from being edited out. Maybe I'm the only real person left in a universe of ghosts who don't know they're dead. December 25th, 2026. Christmas. Appropriate. The birth of hope. The promise of salvation. Except there is no salvation, no hope, no redemption. Just darkness spreading. Just erasure approaching. Just me watching it come. The last witness to humanity's final mistake. Merry Christmas to no one. January 15th, 2027. 1 year since Sojourner entered orbit around Kepler 442b. 1 year since we woke something that should have stayed sleeping. 1 year closer to extinction. Celeste called the satellite phone. Didn't know I still had one. Didn't know she still had the number. Asked me to come home. Said she missed me. Said our daughter missed me. Couldn't remember our daughter's name. Had to ask. Anna. Her name is Anna. She's 8 now. Has a birthday coming up, February 3rd. She'll be 9, and then 10, and then 20, and then 30, and then 54, and then the sky will go dark and she'll be erased from existence, and it will be like she never existed at all. Couldn't tell Celeste that. Told her I was fine, told her I'd come home soon. We both knew I was lying. March 3rd, 2027. 2 years since we first detected the Sentinel. 2 years since everything changed. 2 years since we should have turned away. The darkness has consumed 217 stars now. I've updated the projections. Current spread rate accelerating faster than previous models predicted. New estimate, 46 years, 8 months, 4 days. It's speeding up. Each star makes it stronger. Each light consumed gives it more power to consume more light. Exponential growth. Unstoppable. Inevitable. July 22nd, 2027. Something changed. The Sentinel's transmission stopped completely. Total silence from Kepler 442b. Checked all my instruments, nothing wrong. the Sentinel just went dark. After broadcasting continuously for hundreds of millions of years, it finally died. The last Guardian has fallen. The seal is broken, it's free, it's rising, and nothing stands between it and us anymore. By late 2027, Meridian had become more ghost than man. A skeletal figure haunting the abandoned facility, sustained only by obsession and the terrible responsibility of bearing witness. His video journals showed progressive deterioration, not just of his body but of his mind. Speech patterns breaking down, thoughts becoming fragmented, reality itself seeming less certain. November 9th, 2027. Tried to calculate how long the compressed matter seal will maintain integrity without the Sentinel's reinforcement field. Math doesn't work anymore. Numbers refuse to stay consistent. Write down an equation, look away, look back, different equation on the page. Causality becoming unreliable. Local space-time destabilizing. It's starting, the erasure, beginning at the source and spreading outward. Kepler 442b might already be gone, might have ceased to ever exist, which means the Antecedent Choir never existed, which means they never sealed the well, which means the well was never sealed, which means it was always free, always hunting, always consuming. How do we stop something that rewrites history so it was never stopped in the first place? December 31st, 2027, New Year's Eve, last one? No, still 45 years left, assuming time continues functioning normally, assuming causality maintains coherence, assuming reality doesn't completely collapse before the darkness reaches us. Those are big assumptions. Check the telescope. 362 stars dark now. The expanding sphere of nothing, of unexistence, of erasure, moving toward us. 45 years, 5 months, 16 days. Assuming my calculations are still accurate. Assuming mathematics still works. Assuming numbers mean the same thing tomorrow that they meant today. The final video journal entry was recorded on January 14th, 2028, one day before the second anniversary of Sojourner's destruction. Meridian sat in front of the camera, barely recognizable as human. His eyes had developed a strange quality, as if he was looking at multiple realities simultaneously, seeing things that existed in more than 3 dimensions. His hands shook constantly. His voice was hoarse from disuse. This is Dr. Meridian Thorne. Today is January 14th, 2028. 2 years since we woke it. 45 years until it arrives. I'm recording this because I don't think I can continue much longer. Body's failing, mind's failing, reality's failing. But someone needs to keep watching. Someone needs to maintain the vigil. Someone needs to document the approach of our extinction. He paused, staring into the camera, with eyes that had seen too much. I've been thinking about the Antecedent Choir, about those 80 billion individuals who flew into darkness, who compressed themselves into stone, who gave up everything to save people they'd never meet. Were they afraid? Yes. The records say yes, but they did it anyway. They chose sacrifice over survival, chose meaning over existence, chose to matter for one moment rather than persist meaninglessly forever. Another pause, longer. Humanity had the same choice. The Antecedent Choir offered us the same gift they gave themselves, the opportunity to matter, to honor their sacrifice by learning from their mistake, to choose wisdom over curiosity, to survive by respecting the boundaries they died to establish. But we couldn't do it, couldn't choose survival, couldn't resist knowing, couldn't honor their sacrifice because we couldn't believe it applied to us. We were special, we were different, we were smarter. His voice cracked. We were wrong. And in 45 years, when the sky goes dark, when reality begins unraveling, when people start forgetting their children, and stars remember different pasts, and causality becomes optional, someone might watch this recording and understand that we knew. We knew what was coming. We were warned. We were given a chance, and we threw it away because humans would rather die knowing than live ignorant. He reached toward the camera, hands shaking so badly it took 3 attempts to find the button. If anyone finds this, if anyone survives long enough to watch this, if reality persists long enough for these words to mean something, I'm sorry. We're sorry. The Antecedent Choir tried. We tried. We failed. We failed them. We failed you. We failed everyone who will be erased when the darkness comes. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. God forgive us. God forgive me. The recording ended. Meridian Thorne was never seen again. Security footage from nearby highway cameras showed no vehicles approaching or leaving the Distant Reach facility. No record of him in any hospital or morgue or police report. He simply disappeared as completely as if he'd never existed. Some said he died in the desert, body claimed by heat and scavengers. Some said he went mad and wandered into the wasteland. Some said he was taken by government agents to suppress his knowledge. But Iris believed something else. She believed he was erased, believed the well had reached across space and time and removed him from existence because he'd looked too long, known too much, connected too deeply. Believed he was the first casualty of an erasure that would eventually consume everyone. She didn't share that belief publicly, just kept it to herself, a private terror she carried while going through the motions of normal life, raising her daughter, pretending everything was fine, watching the stars at night and counting the ones that remained. In 2030, 4 years after Sojourner's destruction, the astronomical community quietly acknowledged that stars in the Kepler 442b sector were disappearing, not dimming, not going supernova, disappearing, ceasing to appear in photographs despite having been documented for centuries. Stellar cartography charts requiring constant revision as familiar stars vanished from maps. The official explanation: errors in previous observations, improvements in measurement technology, revealing that many stars previously catalogued were actually artifacts of instrument noise or misidentification of distant galaxies. Nothing to worry about, just science correcting itself, just our understanding improving. But amateur astronomers noticed the pattern, noticed that corrections always originated from the same region of space, always spread outward in an expanding sphere, always moved in the same direction, towards Sol. In 2035, major observatories began experiencing instrumentation failures when pointed towards specific sectors. Telescopes would malfunction, cameras would produce corrupted images, sensors would return impossible readings or no readings at all. Funding was redirected toward other projects. Research into those sectors quietly ceased. By 2040, 14 years after Sojourner, the darkness had become visible to the naked eye, a region of the night sky where stars simply weren't. Not hidden behind dust clouds, not blocked by some astronomical object, just absent, a void, a wound in the cosmos, growing larger every year. Astronomers explained it as newly discovered dark nebula. The public accepted the explanation because the alternative was too terrible to contemplate. Life continued. People went to work. Children went to school. Everyone pretended the growing emptiness in the night sky was natural. Iris watched her daughter grow. Anna turned 18 in 2036, graduated high school with honors, got accepted to university to study biology, wanted to understand life, wanted to explore the world, wanted to make a difference. Iris couldn't tell her that in 31 years, when Anna was 49, the darkness would reach Earth. Couldn't explain that all her dreams and ambitions and hopes would be erased, edited out of existence as if they'd never been. Couldn't burden her child with knowledge of inevitable extinction. So she smiled. She celebrated. She attended graduation. She moved Anna into her dorm room. She hugged her goodbye and told her to study hard and make good choices and call home regularly. She did all the things mothers do, maintaining the illusion of futures that would never exist. And at night, alone in a house that felt too empty, she stood at her window and watched the stars go out. Tobias continued monitoring, documenting, recording. His online database grew to enormous size, gigabytes of observations and calculations and projections. A small community of researchers contributed, adding their own observations, verifying calculations, building a comprehensive documentation of humanity's approaching end. They called themselves the Witnesses. Not a formal organization, no leadership structure, no membership requirements, just people who knew the truth and couldn't look away. People who'd been in mission control. People who'd studied the Sentinel's transmissions. People who'd checked the calculations and found them accurate. People who understood that in decades measured by a single human lifetime, everything would end. In 2045, 19 years after Sojourner, the Witnesses numbered approximately 3,000 individuals scattered across 47 countries. They shared information, encrypted and hidden. They maintained archives in multiple locations. They prepared documentation for whoever might survive, though they all knew no one would survive. They watched the darkness approach, measured its spread, calculated arrival time with increasing precision. Current estimate: 26 years, 7 months, 11 days until the leading edge reached Sol system, until Earth entered the sphere of erasure, until reality itself began unraveling. In 2050, the darkness became undeniable. 1/8 of the night sky was simply empty now. No stars, no galaxies, no distant light, just void, just nothing. Just absence spreading like cancer through the cosmos. Governments could no longer suppress it. Religious leaders struggled to provide meaning. Scientists offered explanations that convinced no one. And people started to understand, in the way that prey animals understand when they smell predator, that something was wrong. Something was coming. Something that couldn't be stopped or fought or escaped. Panic spread. Stock markets crashed, governments fell, religions splintered. Some people embraced hedonism, living for the moment because the future had become uncertain. Some embraced despair, giving up on everything because the end seemed inevitable. Some embraced denial, insisting it was all misunderstood, all exaggerated, all going to be fine. But the Witnesses knew better. They'd known for decades, had been trying to warn everyone for decades, and now that people were finally listening, it was far too late. In 2055, 29 years after Sojourner, Iris received a package in the mail. No return address. Postmarked from New Mexico. Inside, a waterproof case containing dozens of notebooks and a hard drive. Meridian's records, his observations, his calculations, his video journals, everything he'd documented during his final years alone at the Distant Reach facility, and a note, handwritten on the last page of the last notebook. Iris, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Means the erasure took me, or age claimed me, or I finally gave up. Doesn't matter which. What matters is the work continues. What matters is someone keeps watching. Someone documents the approach. Someone maintains the vigil. The Antecedent Choir watched for 380 million years. We can watch for 47. It's the least we owe them. The least we owe everyone who will be erased. Keep watching, keep recording, keep documenting. Let there be evidence, let there be proof. Let there be witnesses to the end. It's all we can do now. It's all we have left. Keep watching. Please, Meridian. She wept, holding that note. Wept for Meridian, who'd sacrificed everything to bear witness. Wept for the Antecedent Choir, who died to save people who didn't listen. Wept for her daughter, who would be 54 when the darkness came. Wept for humanity, which had been offered survival and chosen knowledge instead. But she kept watching, kept the databases updated, kept the documentation current, kept the vigil that Meridian had started, and she would continue until the end. In 2060, the darkness covered half the night sky. Earth's rotation meant that sometimes, for hours at a stretch, no stars were visible. Just endless void overhead. Just absence. Just nothing. Civilization began collapsing. Supply chains broke down. Governments lost authority. People stopped maintaining infrastructure because what was the point of fixing things that would cease to exist? Society regressed, not to earlier technological states, but to something primal, something desperate, something that had given up on futures. Anna, now 42, came home to live with Iris. Brought her own children, twin daughters aged 12. They'd stopped going to school because schools had stopped functioning. Stopped pretending there would be careers or college or lives beyond the next few years. They sat together on the porch at night, 4 generations of women, watching the empty sky. The twins asked questions, asked what was coming, asked if the stories were true, asked if there was hope. Iris couldn't lie to them, told them the truth, told them about the Sentinel and the Antecedent Choir and humanity's final mistake. Told them they had 17 years left. 17 years to live as fully as possible before erasure came. The twins absorbed this with the strange acceptance of children who'd been born into apocalypse. They'd never known a world where the future felt certain. They'd never experienced hope, untainted by knowledge of inevitable end. They nodded and said they understood and asked if they could make cookies. Life continued, smaller, simpler, more immediate. People stopped planning beyond next week, stopped saving for retirements that would never come, stopped maintaining institutions that had no future, focused on the moment because the moment was all that remained. In 2070, 44 years after Sojourner, the darkness covered 90% of the visible sky. Only a few stars remained, a handful of lights in an ocean of nothing. Everyone knew what came next. Anna was 52. The twins were 22. Iris was 73. They lived together in a house that had stopped having electricity or running water years ago. They grew vegetables, they collected rainwater. They survived day to day in a world that had stopped pretending it had a tomorrow. Tobias was still alive somehow. 76 years old and still maintaining the database, still recording observations, still documenting the approach. He'd outlived most of the original witnesses, outlived the infrastructure that had supported their network, outlived the civilization that had launched Sojourner and doomed itself. But he kept working because someone had to, because the Antecedent Choir had watched for 380 million years and humanity owed them at least 47. He communicated with Iris through ham radio, one of the few technologies still functioning after the collapse of satellite networks and internet infrastructure. They shared observations, compared calculations, maintained the vigil together across the miles between them. Current estimate? Iris asked on a cold January night in 2071, speaking into the microphone while her family slept upstairs. Tobias's voice crackled through the speaker, old and tired, but still precise. 6 years, 3 months, 7 days until leading edge reaches Earth's orbit. Margin of error plus or minus 2 weeks. The acceleration has plateaued. It's consumed enough stellar mass that its velocity stabilized, moving at approximately 47 times light speed relative to normal space-time. Still 47. Always 47. What does it mean? Iris asked, though she'd asked this question 1,000 times before. Why that number? Why does it keep appearing? I don't know, Tobias admitted. Maybe it's just coincidence, maybe it's how the well measures things. Maybe it's a message we're not equipped to understand. Meridian thought it meant something, spent years trying to decode it, never found an answer. They fell silent, listening to static hiss across the distance between them. "I'm scared, Tobias," Iris finally said. "Not for me. I've had a full life, but Anna, the twins, they deserved more time, deserved to grow old, deserved to have their own children and watch them grow. They deserved futures." "Everyone did," Tobias replied quietly. "Every human who'll be erased. Every person who will cease to have ever existed. They all deserved more. But we made a choice. As a species, we chose to look. And this is the consequence." "Do you think we had a choice?" Iris asked. "Really? Or were we always going to look? Is curiosity so fundamental to human nature that we never could have chosen differently?" Tobias didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of 45 years of thinking about this question. "I don't know. Maybe we were always doomed. Maybe the moment humans evolved consciousness and curiosity, our extinction became inevitable. Or maybe we had a choice and we made it badly. Either way, the result is the same. In 6 years, 3 months, and 7 days, give or take, everything ends." In 2073, the last visible stars disappeared. The night sky became perfectly black, empty of everything except the moon, which still reflected the sun's light because Sol hadn't been reached yet. But the stars were gone. All of them. Every point of light that had guided human navigation for millennia. Every constellation that had inspired myths and stories. Every distant sun that had made people feel small and connected and part of something vast. All gone. All erased. All edited out of existence as if they'd never been. People stopped going outside at night. The darkness was too oppressive, too absolute, too wrong. It felt like being swallowed. Like standing at the edge of an infinite void. Like looking at nothing and having nothing look back. During the day, life continued in its diminished form. Small communities of survivors, maintaining subsistence agriculture, sharing resources, helping each other through the final years. No governments, no economies, no institutions. Just people trying to be human for as long as humanity lasted. Anna's twins, now 25, fell in love with boys from a neighbouring farm. There were weddings in the summer of 2074, simple ceremonies with wildflowers and handmade rings and promises that everyone knew would be broken by forces beyond their control. But they made the promises anyway, chose meaning over futility, chose to affirm life even as extinction approached. Iris watched her granddaughters marry and felt something break inside her. They were so young, so full of hope despite everything, so determined to find joy in the time remaining. They deserved to grow old together, deserved to have children, deserved to build lives that extended beyond the next 3 years. But the darkness was coming, and no amount of deserving would stop it. In 2075, strange phenomena began. People reported memories that didn't match reality, remembered siblings who'd never existed, forgot children who were standing right in front of them. Historical records changed spontaneously. Photographs showed different people than they had yesterday. Reality itself was becoming unstable. The leading edge of erasure beginning to affect Earth even before the darkness physically arrived. Tobias documented everything, collected testimonies, recorded the changes, maintained the database that no one would ever read, because everyone who might read it would be erased along with the data itself. But he documented anyway because that's what witnesses did. They bore testimony, they recorded truth, they maintained the vigil until the end. In March 2076, Iris woke up one morning and couldn't remember her husband's name. She'd been widowed for 15 years, remembered him dying, remembered the funeral, remembered grieving. But his name was gone, his face was fading, details of their life together becoming uncertain, like a dream upon waking, present but already slipping away. She called Tobias on the ham radio, voice shaking. "It's starting. The erasure. It's starting with memories." "I know," he replied. "I forgot my sister yesterday. Spent an hour trying to remember her name. Then I realized I never had a sister. But I have memories of her. Clear memories. Childhood memories. She was real. I know she was real. But she's gone now. Edited out. And soon the memories will fade too, and it'll be like she never existed." "How long?" Iris asked. "Months, maybe weeks. The leading edge of the darkness will reach Earth's orbital path on July 18th, 2077. After that, things will accelerate. Reality will unravel completely. But the editing has already begun. We're already inside the erasure zone, already being unmade. July 18th, 2077, 51 years, 6 months and 3 days after Sojourner entered orbit around Kepler 442b. 51 years since humanity woke, something that should have stayed sleeping forever. Iris stood in her backyard, surrounded by her family. Anna, now 59. The twins, now 29. Their husbands. A scattering of neighbours who'd become family through shared survival. Everyone who remained. The sun set normally, the sky darkened from blue to purple to black, and then, at 9:47 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, the moon disappeared. Not gradually, not slowly. One moment it was there, a crescent hanging in the sky. The next moment, gone, completely, utterly. As if it had never existed. Someone screamed. Someone else fainted. People clutched each other, searching the sky for the moon that had been there seconds ago. But there was nothing, just darkness. Absolute darkness. The kind of darkness that shouldn't exist on a planet with an atmosphere. The kind of darkness that consumed everything, even hope. "It's here," Iris whispered. "The darkness. It's reached us." The stars had been gone for years, but the moon's disappearance was different. More immediate. More visceral. The moon had been constant. Had marked time. Had given light on dark nights. Had been there since before humans existed, and should have been there long after humans were gone. But it was gone now. Erased. Edited out of existence. And if the moon could be erased, then anything could be erased. Everything would be erased. The next morning, the sun rose. That was surprising. That gave people hope. If the sun still existed, maybe Earth would survive. Maybe the darkness wouldn't consume everything. Maybe some remnant of humanity would persist. But by noon, the sky had changed. The blue was fading, not darkening, not clouding over, just fading, becoming less saturated, less certain, as if the concept of blue sky was being forgotten by reality itself. By evening, the sky was grey. Not cloudy grey, not stormy grey, just grey, colourless, empty of everything except the sun, which still shone but seemed dimmer, as if its light was being absorbed by something invisible. That night, people didn't sleep. They gathered in groups, held each other, told stories, shared memories, tried to affirm their existence while existence still meant something. Tried to remember they were real while reality still functioned. Tobias broadcast continuously on the ham radio, narrating what was happening, documenting the end for no one. July 19th, 2077. The erasure has begun in earnest. The moon ceased to exist at 9:47 p.m. yesterday. Sky is losing colour. Reports from around the world, where communication still functions, indicate similar phenomena globally. This is not localized. This is not survivable. This is the end. To whoever finds this recording, if anyone can find anything after erasure is complete, we knew. Humanity knew what was coming. We were warned by a civilization that died to save us. We looked anyway. We woke it anyway. We chose this. Remember that. Remember we had a choice. Remember we chose extinction over ignorance. Remember the Antecedent Choir. Remember they tried. Remember we failed them. Remember. The transmission cut off midword. Iris tried calling back, got only static. Tried again the next day. Static. Tried the day after. Static. Tobias was gone. Whether dead or erased, the result was the same. She was alone now. The last witness. The final person maintaining the vigil that Meridian had started 51 years ago. She continued documenting in notebooks, writing by hand, because electricity had failed and batteries had died and everything technological had stopped functioning. She wrote about what she saw, about how the world was ending, about how reality was unmaking itself. July 21st, colours are fading from everything. The grass is grey, the sky is grey. Anna's hair is grey, though it should be brown. The twins are becoming difficult to distinguish from each other, their features blurring, individuality fading. July 23rd, people are forgetting each other. One of the twins, I can't remember which, asked about her sister. Her sister was standing right next to her. She couldn't see her, couldn't remember her. Her own twin, gone from her perception. I can still see both of them, for now. July 25th, Anna forgot she had children. I told her about the twins. She looked at me like I was crazy, said she never had children, said she never wanted children. But they're here, I can see them. They exist. They're real, aren't they? July 27th, I can't remember Anna's face. I know she's my daughter. I have memories of raising her, of her childhood, of her growing up. But when I try to picture her face, there's nothing. Just a blur. Just absence. She's standing in front of me and I can't see her properly. July 29th. The house is changing. Rooms I remember are gone. Rooms I don't remember are present. The layout keeps shifting. Or maybe it was always like this and I'm misremembering. Hard to tell what's real anymore. Hard to trust anything. July 31st, woke up alone. Don't know where everyone went. Call out their names, but can't remember the names. Call out anyway, wordless sounds, hoping someone will answer. No one does. House is empty. World is empty. Am I the last one? Was I always the last one? Did I imagine everyone else? Can't remember anymore. Can't trust memory. Can't trust perception. Can't trust anything. August 2nd, the sun is fading, still rises, still sets, but dimmer each day. Like a light bulb dying, like reality running out of power. How long until it goes out completely? How long until darkness is absolute? August 5th, tried to write yesterday but couldn't remember how. Remembered today, for now. Writing this while I still can. While words still mean something. While language still functions. The erasure is accelerating. Soon there won't be anyone left who remembers writing existed. Soon there won't be anyone left at all. August 9th. Can't remember my name. Know I had one. Everyone has names. But mine is gone. Tried to write it, but hand won't form the letters. Tried to speak it, but tongue won't make the sounds. I'm becoming nameless. Becoming no one, becoming nothing. August 12th. Who am I? Why am I writing? What are these symbols? They meant something once. I'm sure they meant something. But meaning is fading. Language is fading. Thought itself is fading. Soon there will be nothing left but silence and darkness and the absence of everything. The final entry in Iris's notebook, dated August 15th, 2077, contained only a single line written in shaking handwriting that barely formed coherent letters. We looked, and it looked back. The notebook was found years later, decades later, in a house that had been abandoned. Found by someone. Found by no one. Found in a reality that was uncertain whether the notebook had ever been written. whether the person who wrote it had ever existed, whether any of this had ever been real. The darkness completed its consumption of Earth on August 18th, 2077. Or perhaps it was August the 19th. Or perhaps it was always darkness and the light had been the anomaly. Time became uncertain, dates became meaningless, reality forgot how to maintain coherence. The sun disappeared, not dramatically, not with some cosmic event, just faded like a candle burning out, growing dimmer and dimmer, until one moment it was there, and the next moment it wasn't. And with its disappearance, the last light in Sol system went out. Earth became cold, quickly, temperature dropping hundreds of degrees in hours as thermal energy was absorbed by the advancing erasure. Oceans froze solid, atmosphere began condensing. Everything that lived died. Everything that had lived was forgotten. Everything that could live ceased to be possible. But the erasure didn't stop with physical death. Physical death was just the beginning. The real horror was the editing, the rewriting of history, the removal of Earth's entire existence from the universe's memory. Earth hadn't been destroyed. Earth had been made to never exist. Sol system hadn't been consumed. Sol system had been edited out of cosmic history. The planets had never formed. The star had never ignited. The nebula from which the system had coalesced had taken a different configuration. Reality rewrote itself backward through time, changing causality, altering history, ensuring that Earth had never been. Humanity hadn't been killed. Humanity had been erased, made to have never existed. Every person who'd ever lived, from the first hominids in Africa to the last survivors watching the sky go dark, all of them edited out. Their lives never lived. Their thoughts never thought. Their loves never felt. Their dreams never dreamed. The pyramids were never built. Stonehenge never raised. Rome never rose. The Renaissance never flourished. The Industrial Revolution never occurred. The space age never began. Sojourner never launched. The well never opened because there had never been anyone to open it. 47 extinct civilizations within broadcast range of Kepler 442b, now 48. All of them erased so completely that the universe didn't remember they'd existed. All of them victims of curiosity. All of them punished for looking at what should never be seen. The darkness spread outward from Sol, continuing its expansion, moving toward the next stars, the next civilizations, the next curious minds that would look and wonder and wake what should stay sleeping. In the ruins of the Distant Reach facility, in what had been New Mexico, in a nation called America, on a planet called Earth, in a reality that no longer existed, equipment that shouldn't exist anymore continued monitoring through some quantum uncertainty that hadn't yet been edited away. The last telescope, the one Meridian had reactivated, still pointed at the coordinates where Kepler 442b had been, where the Sentinel had stood, where the well had opened, and in the storage room where Meridian had maintained his final vigil. A video camera still recorded, had been recording for 51 years, recording nothing but darkness now, recording the absence of everything, recording proof that would never be seen because there was no one left to see it. But the camera recorded anyway, because that's what witnesses did. They bore testimony, they maintained truth, they affirmed that what had happened was real, even when reality itself denied it. The final frame recorded by that camera, before the facility itself was erased from existence, showed darkness, absolute darkness, nothing but black filling the frame. But in that darkness, barely perceptible, something moved, something vast, something that existed in more dimensions than the camera could properly record, something that was aware and awake and satisfied, something that had fed on existence itself and was still hungry, something that was moving on to the next meal. The well had opened. The guardian had fallen. And something ancient and patient and inevitable was spreading through the galaxy, consuming light, erasing consciousness, editing reality itself until nothing remained but silence and darkness and the absence of all things. The universe would continue. Stars would still burn in regions the darkness hadn't reached. Civilizations would still evolve on distant worlds. Life would still arise and achieve consciousness and look up at the stars and wonder. And eventually one of those civilizations would develop telescopes powerful enough to detect Kepler 442b, would notice an anomaly, would investigate, would hear the Sentinel's warning broadcast that had been playing for hundreds of millions of years, transmitted by technology that predated their evolution, warning them about something terrible waiting in the dark. And they would face the same choice humanity had faced, the same choice the Antecedent Choir had faced, the same choice 47 civilizations had faced. Turn away. Honor the sacrifice of those who died to protect them. Choose survival over knowledge. Choose wisdom over curiosity. Or look. Investigate. Open the well. Wake what should stay sleeping. Most would look. That's what consciousness did. That's what curiosity demanded. That's what intelligence required. The need to know. The need to understand. The need to look into the darkness and see what looks back. And when they looked, the darkness would notice them noticing it, and they would be erased, edited out, made to have never existed. The cycle would continue. Civilization after civilization, species after species, each one thinking they were different, special, smart enough to survive what destroyed everyone else. Each one wrong. Each one added to the count of extinct species within broadcast range. 48, 49, 50, the number growing, the well feeding, the darkness spreading, reality unraveling one curious species at a time, in the space where Earth had been, where Sol had burned, where humanity had briefly existed before making the mistake of looking at what should never be seen. There was now only absence, only nothing. Only the cold vacuum of space that didn't remember anything had ever been there. But in that absence, in that nothing, in that vacuum, something persisted. Some quantum uncertainty, some observer effect, some tiny probability that hadn't yet collapsed. And in that probability, a whisper, an echo, a ghost of information that couldn't quite be erased. The Antecedent Choir had known this would happen, had known their seal would eventually fail, had known that each civilization that investigated would feed the well, make it stronger, help it spread, had known that their sacrifice would ultimately be insufficient. But they'd done it anyway, had thrown themselves into the darkness anyway, had become the prison wall anyway. Because even if they couldn't prevent every species from repeating their mistake, they could prevent some. They could give some civilizations the chance to turn away, to choose survival, to honor the sacrifice of the dead by refusing to join them. Most would fail that test. Most would look, but maybe some wouldn't. Maybe somewhere some species would hear the warning and listen, would see the coordinates of 48 extinct civilizations and understand, would choose ignorance over extinction. Maybe that one species would survive, would persist, would carry consciousness forward into the deep future after the well had consumed everything else, would remember the Antecedent Choir and humanity and all the others who died because they couldn't resist knowing. Maybe, maybe, maybe. It was a slim hope, an impossible hope. But it was the only hope the Antecedent Choir had left to offer, the only meaning that could be salvaged from their sacrifice. The possibility that somewhere, sometime, someone would make the choice they hadn't, the choice humanity hadn't, the choice that led to survival instead of erasure. In the deepening darkness, in the expanding sphere of nothing, in the growing absence of all things, that hope persisted, small and fragile and probably futile, but persisting nonetheless, because consciousness, once it existed, couldn't help but hope, couldn't help but believe that maybe next time would be different, couldn't help but affirm meaning in the face of meaninglessness, even when all evidence suggested otherwise, even when reality itself denied it, even when the darkness consumed everything. The universe stretched vast and cold and increasingly empty. The well continued its work. The darkness continued spreading. Reality continued unraveling. And somewhere, on some distant world, in some future time, another species would evolve consciousness, would look up at the stars, would wonder what was out there, would develop technology to search for answers, would find Kepler 442b, would detect the sentinel, would hear the warning, and would face the choice, look or turn away, knowledge or survival, curiosity or wisdom. Most would look, most would be erased, but maybe one would choose differently. Maybe one would honor the dead. Maybe one would survive. It was a slim hope, but it was all that remained in the darkness, in the silence, in the absence of all things. A whisper of possibility, a ghost of hope, a final testimony to the eternal question that consciousness could never stop asking, even when asking meant extinction. What if? The answer spoken by the void, echoed by the darkness, affirmed by the erasure of 48 civilizations. You shouldn't have looked. But by the time you hear that answer, it's already too late. You've already seen. And it's already seen you. And there's no turning away. Not anymore. Not ever again. The darkness spreads. The well hungers. Reality unravels. And consciousness pays the price for its curiosity. Always. Inevitably. Forever. Don't look up. Don't watch the stars. Don't ask what's waiting in the dark. Some questions shouldn't be answered. Some knowledge isn't worth having. Some doors should stay closed. The Antecedent Choir learned that lesson. Humanity learned that lesson. 48 civilizations learned that lesson. Someone will learn it again. And again. And again. Until consciousness itself becomes extinct. Until the universe forgets that awareness ever existed. Until nothing remains but darkness and silence and the slow heat, death of reality itself. The well waits, patient, hungry, inevitable. And somewhere someone is looking, right now, at this very moment. Someone is pointing a telescope at something they shouldn't see. Someone is asking a question they shouldn't ask. Someone is opening a door they shouldn't open. And the darkness notices, and the erasure begins, and another species joins the count. 49, 50. The number grows, the cycle continues. The universe forgets until nothing remains but the warning, the eternal warning, the warning that no one heeds. Don't look, please, and don't look. We're sorry. We're so sorry. God forgive us all. In a facility that no longer exists, in a desert that was never there, on a planet that never formed, a recording that shouldn't exist plays on a loop to no one. Dr. Meridian Thorne's final message transmitted into a void that doesn't remember him. We looked, and it looked back. And now we're gone. And you will be too, because you're looking right now, and it sees you. Run. But there's nowhere to run. There never was. The moment you became curious about what was out there, your fate was sealed. The moment your species achieved consciousness, the countdown began. 47 years, 47 civilizations, 47 minutes. Always 47. The universe's final joke on consciousness, the price of awareness, the cost of curiosity, the inevitable end of all things that dare to ask, what if? Don't look, but you will. They always do.